Tonight we're exploring the full history of the creation trio, the legendary dragons known as Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. There is a lot to explore here, but I'll keep the pacing gentle so you can still settle in and fall asleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here, and if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Imagine, if you will, a state of being that is not a state of being at all. Before the first sunrise, before the first breath of wind moved across the surface of a world, and before the very concept of a world even existed, there was only the void. This was not a darkness you could see, for there were no eyes to perceive it, and no light to be absent. It was a vast, echoing emptiness, a primordial chaos, where the laws of physics were not yet written. In this silence, which stretched for an eternity that hadn't even begun to be measured, something appeared, a single egg. We do not know where the egg came from, or what force allowed it to manifest in a place where existence itself was a foreign concept. But there it sat, a solitary point of potential in an infinite ocean of nothingness. From this egg, the original one hatched, Arceus. When Arceus opened its eyes, it did not see a universe. It saw a canvas of pure chaos. To bring order to this chaos, the original one began a process of creation, so monumental that it defies human understanding. It is said that Arceus was not alone in those first moments, that it was born alongside 16 hidden giants, beings of immense power that represented the fundamental building blocks of what was to come. To create the world we know, Arceus had to overcome these forces, refining their raw essence into the 16 plates that now hold the power of every type known to the world of Pokémon. These plates are more than just artifacts. They are the stabilized shards of that original chaos, the very foundation of reality. But even with the plates, the universe was a static thing. It lacked the movement of time and the dimension of space. It was a frozen moment in a void that had no room to grow. To solve this, Arceus summoned forth the Unown. These strange, symbolic entities acted as the alphabet of creation, the bridge between the will of the creator and the manifestation of reality. Through their collective power, a great event occurred at the very heart of what would eventually become the Sinnoh region. At the highest peak of a mountain that would one day be called Coronet, 3 great beings were brought into existence simultaneously. They did not arrive one after another. They were born in a single, shattering instant of cosmic birth. These were the dragons of creation in their primordial origin forms. There was Dialga, the master of time. There was Palkia, the master of space. And there was Giratina, the master of antimatter. In that moment, the universe as we understand it truly began. The silence was broken by the first heartbeat of time, a rhythmic pulse that started at the center of Dialga's chest and radiated outward to the furthest reaches of the cosmos. Suddenly, there was a past to remember and a future to anticipate. The now was no longer an infinite, unchanging state. It became a fleeting transition, a bridge between what was and what will be. As Dialga took its first breath, the seconds began to tick, the minutes began to flow, and the long, slow march of the ages was set into motion. Alongside this birth of time came the expansion of space. Palkia, with a sweep of its massive wings, pushed back the boundaries of the void. It created the where. It carved out the dimensions that allowed for height, depth, and width. Because of Palkia, the universe was no longer a single point. It became a vast expanse where stars could hang in the firmament and planets could find their orbits. Distance was born. The concept of being here or there became possible. Palkia's very breath is said to stabilize the dimensions, ensuring that the fabric of reality remains taut and navigable. Without Palkia, the universe would collapse back into a single, dimensionless dot would remain frozen for all eternity. But there was a third, Giratina. While its siblings were granted the realms of time and space, Giratina was given dominion over the shadow of creation. It was the guardian of antimatter, the reverse side of the coin. If Dialga and Palkia represented the structure of the world, Giratina represented the volatile energy that exists in the spaces between. It was the most powerful of the three, and perhaps the most misunderstood. In those early days, the three dragons worked in a delicate, shifting harmony to build the foundation of the cosmos. They were the architects of reality, the hands of the Creator reaching out into the dark. Yet, as we look back through the ancient texts of the Hisui region and the legends passed down by the Diamond and Pearl clans, that this harmony was fragile. The history of the creation trio is not just a story of building, it is a story of conflict, of banishment, and of the deep, lingering scars left on the world by gods who could not agree on the nature of their own existence. The tragedy of Giratina, whose violent nature led to its exile into a world where time does not flow, and space is a distorted dream. The eternal rivalry between Dialga and Palkia, a philosophical dispute that has, at times, threatened to tear the very sky apart. The people of Old Sinnoh looked up at Mount Coronet with a mixture of reverence and terror. They knew that their entire world rested on the stability of these three entities. They understood that if the Master of Time grew angry, the seasons might stop or the years might reverse. They knew that if the Master of Space was disturbed, the very ground beneath their feet might fold or vanish. To appease these forces, they built temples and forged chains, trying to find a way for mere mortals to coexist with the titans who shaped the stars. They told stories of the Lake Guardians, the three small spirits of knowledge, emotion, and willpower, who were created by Arceus to serve as a balance, a way to soothe the rage of the dragons and keep the world from spiraling back into the chaos from which it came. Tonight, we are going to walk through these legends. We will travel back to the dawn of the universe to witness the first egg. We will stand on the peaks of the ancient Hisui region and watch as the space-time rift opens, pouring out the distorted energy of a forgotten god. We will explore the silent, gravity-defying halls of the Distortion World and try to understand the loneliness of a being banished for the crime of its own nature. We will look at the Red Chain, the artifacts of the clans, and the secret history of those who tried to use the power of the gods for their own ends. This is a story of how the world was made, and how close it has come to being unmade. It is a history written in the stars and carved into the stones of the spear pillar. As we begin this journey, let the weight of your day fall away. Imagine the cold, thin air at the top of the world, the shimmering light of the temporal and spatial realms, and the deep, pulsing blue and pearl light of the dragons as they watch over us from the edges of reality. The history of the creation trio is the history of everything, every moment you have ever lived, and every inch of ground you have ever walked upon is a gift from these three. Let us see how that gift was forged, and what it cost the ones who gave it. The silence of the void is calling, and the first heartbeat of time is about to strike. We go now to the beginning, to the mountain that touches the heavens, to uncover the truth of the dragons who hold the universe in their hands. Before there was anything at all, there was no such thing as a beginning. The universe had not yet been born, and the very idea of a universe was itself impossible. Instead, there was only a vast, empty, and silent void. This was not the emptiness we know when we look up at the night sky. This was a sea of pure chaos and nothingness, a state where no laws of physics had yet been written, where no light could shine because there was no source of illumination, where no sound could travel because there was no air to carry it. It was a formless expanse, a raw and untamed potential that held no patterns, no shapes, no distinctions. It was order before order existed, a perfect balance of absence where everything was possible but nothing had yet become. It was a reality so still that concepts like distance and duration had no meaning. The idea of a meter or a mile required space to be stretched across, but space had not been unfolded yet. The idea of a second or an hour required time to flow from one moment to the next, but time had not been set in motion. There was no here or there, no before or after. Everything was suspended in a frozen state of absolute potential. It was a silence that had persisted for an eternity, that had never begun. This silence was not the quiet of a peaceful night. It was a deeper quiet, the quiet of a universe that had not yet learned to breathe. It was the stillness before the first word of creation, but within this eternal darkness, there was a single point, a point of energy that was different from the rest of the formless chaos. This point was the center of the void, though center itself was a notion that barely applied. It was a concentration of something in a world of nothing, a spark of intent amidst the indifference. From this point, the first egg emerged. It did not hatch from anything. It did not appear through any process we could understand. It simply existed. It was the first object to take shape in a world without form. The egg was a perfect sphere of luminous essence. It hovered in the darkness as if suspended in a dream. It was the seed from which all of creation would grow. This egg was the first glimmer of order in a universe of chaos. It was the first step towards structure and harmony. As it floated in the silent void, it began to pulse with a gentle rhythm. This rhythm was the first heartbeat of reality. It was the sound that would eventually drown out the silence forever. But the silence was deep and ancient. It had ruled over the void for an existence that defied measurement. The egg was a new presence, a disruption in the endless peace of nothingness. Yet it was not a violent disruption. It was a gentle awakening, a slow emergence from a dream that had lasted since before time began. Inside this egg, a consciousness was dreaming. A being of immense power was gathering its strength. This being would one day become the creator of the cosmos, the original one who would shape the multiverse from the raw clay of chaos. Inside the egg, it rested within the shell, unaware of the potential it held. The egg was not made of any material we would recognize. It was a form of pure potential, a container for the first spark of consciousness. It was a vessel for the soul that would become the most powerful force in all existence. But for now, the egg was alone. There was no world to watch it. There was no time to measure its growth. It simply floated in the endless sea of nothing, pulsing with a light that was the first thing to break the absolute darkness. This light was not bright in the way we understand. It was a soft glow, a gentle radiance that seemed to gently push against the void. It was a whisper of what was to come. The void was all that was, and then suddenly, it was not. The egg signaled the end of the age of nothing, and the beginning of everything. What would emerge from this egg would be the first god of the Pokémon world, a being so powerful that it would create the very fabric of reality itself. But before that could happen, the egg had to hatch, and as it pulsed with increasing light, the moment of its awakening drew near. For now, the void remained, but it was no longer alone. The egg was there, and with it, the promise of all that was to come. The universe was about to be born from the chaos. The silence was about to be broken by the first breath of creation. And from the heart of that egg, a new light was stirring. A light that would soon awaken and bring order to the formless expanse, setting the stage for the birth of time and space themselves. The awakening of Arceus was at hand, and the void itself held its breath in anticipation. And so the void remained. Not a cold void, not a dark void. For cold and dark are sensations that require something to measure them against. There was no light, no heat, no silence, no sound, only an absence so complete that even the concept of emptiness had no meaning. The universe existed as a potential, a single note waiting to be struck. Then, from nowhere and from everywhere, something stirred, a shimmer, a gathering of energy that had no source and no destination. It coalesced slowly, patiently, as though the very fabric of what would one day become reality was learning how to hold itself together for the first time. And from that gathering, a form began to take shape. An egg. But not an egg in the way we understand eggs today, with a shell and a yolk and a promise of life. This was an egg of pure possibility, a vessel containing the first spark of consciousness in a universe that had never known such a thing. For an eternity, or for an instant, the egg floated in the great emptiness. There was no time to measure how long it remained there, because time itself did not yet exist. There was no space to measure how vast the emptiness was, because space had not been born. There was only the egg, and the egg was everything. And then it broke. Not with a sound, for there was no air to carry vibration. Not with a flash, for there was no light to illuminate the event. The cracking was a fundamental shift in the nature of reality itself. From that shell emerged a being, the original one, Arceus. And with its first breath, the universe suddenly had a witness. Arceus opened its eyes, and in that moment, it was the only thing that existed, the only consciousness in all of creation. It was alone, utterly and completely alone, in a sea of swirling chaos that surrounded it like a storm waiting to break. There was no up or down, no before or after, no here or there. There was only the original one, standing at the center of nothing, looking out into the infinite darkness with a sense of purpose that had not been given to it, but that it simply knew. It was the first thought, the first will, the first I am, but the chaos did not rest. Around Arceus, the primordial substance of the universe churned and writhed, formless and wild. This was the raw stuff of existence, the unshaped clay of reality, and it was angry. It did not want to be ordered. It did not want to be named. It pushed against the presence of the original one, pressing in from all sides, trying to swallow the fragile light of consciousness back into the darkness from which it had come. And Arceus understood. It understood that to exist meant to impose order. To be awake meant to define what was real and what was not. And so the original one began its first act of creation. It reached out, not with hands, for it had no need of such things, but with its will. And from the chaos, 16 forms emerged. These were not the gentle beings that would later guard the lakes of Sinnoh. These were giants, ancient, powerful, and wild. They were born from the chaos itself, each one a fragment of the untamed universe given shape and will. They were the first children of the void, and they did not recognize the authority of Arceus. They saw the original one as a rival, a usurper who had stolen the light from the darkness, and so they fought. The war that followed was not a war of armies or weapons. It was a war of pure essence, of will against will, of order against chaos. Arceus faced these 16 giants, these firstborn of the void, and defeated them one by one, not through destruction, for that would have undone the very fabric of existence, but through transformation. The original one carved their essence into 16 plates, each one holding the power of a defeated giant. The plates became tools, anchors, fragments of the original chaos that could now be used to shape the universe. With the giants subdued, Arceus turned back to the swirling sea around it. The chaos was still there, but now it was manageable. Now it could be molded. The original one raised its power, and the 16 plates began to glow. Light spread outward from the plates, pushing against the darkness, creating a sphere of order in the midst of the chaos. This was the first universe, the cradle of all that would follow, and for a time, Arceus was alone, the only consciousness in that newborn cosmos, shaping the currents of reality with nothing but its will. There were no stars yet, no planets, no life. There was only the original one, and the slowly calming sea of possibility. It was a moment of profound solitude, a silence that stretched across dimensions that had not yet been named. But Arceus knew that this was only the beginning. The universe was vast, and it was empty, and emptiness, the original one understood, was not a state to be preserved, it was a canvas to be painted. The war with the giants had shown Arceus the price of creation, the struggle that comes with bringing order from chaos. But it had also shown the way forward. Those 16 plates, those fragments of the defeated, would become the foundation of all that was to come. They would be the symbols of the forces that would shape the cosmos, the building blocks of reality itself. And so, with the chaos quieted and the first light burning at the center of everything, Arceus prepared to create once more. But this time, it would not create in solitude. This time, it would call forth beings that could share the burden of existence, that could fill the empty spaces with purpose and power. But that story, the story of what came next, the war that had already been fought, and the war that was yet to come, the war of the 16 giants, would have to wait for another moment, for another chapter of this ancient tale. Arceus was the first, the original one. The singular consciousness that emerged from the cosmic egg into an ocean of pure potential. But the vast emptiness that preceded the egg, what else did it hold? What other seeds of existence were sown in that absolute dark? To say Arceus was entirely alone in the beginning might be a simplification of a truth, so ancient it defies our standard mythology. There is a legend, whispered in the oldest texts of Sinnoh, barely visible in the historical record, of the 16 unnamed gods, or giants. They existed alongside Arceus from the very beginning, born not from the egg itself, but forged from the same raw chaos that surrounded it. They were not concepts, they were not good or evil. They were simply forces, primal, untamed and immense. Entities with no identity, no name, no purpose beyond their own raw power of existence, rising from the void to stand as equals or competitors to the fledgling alpha. The universe was too small for so much concentrated potential to coexist peacefully. What followed is known as the celestial battle for dominance over the nascent cosmos. It was not a war fought with armies or weapons we could comprehend. It was a war fought in the language of creation itself. A struggle between the will to form order and the gravity of eternal chaos. Every clash between Arceus and these giants sent shockwaves through the emptiness, creating pockets of reality that would collapse just as quickly as they formed. This was the birth of friction, the first sound, the first light, the first destruction. The giants sought to pull the universe back into the featureless sea from which they had all emerged, a state where nothing could begin or end. Arceus fought for the possibility of a future. In the end, Arceus was victorious. But victory did not mean annihilation. The 16 giants were too fundamental to simply be unmade. Instead, the original one subdued them. It carved their essence into tangible forms, relics of the conflict that held the power of their fallen wills. These became the 16 plates. With the chaos contained, bound into these physical vessels, Arceus could finally shape the universe's laws. The raw power of the giants was refined into the building blocks of existence, the elements, the forces of nature, the very fabric of what would one day become matter and spirit. With the war over, the cosmos could finally expand in peace. But the victory was not without its lasting scars. The plates were the remnants of a war fought before time could keep score. They were shards of the original chaos, crystallized into the very bedrock of reality. The power of the 16 was not gone. It was scattered, it was hidden, and it left a question hanging over the newborn cosmos. A question about what happens to a universe built upon the bones of a forgotten conflict. The answer lies in the fragmented remnants of that first and greatest war. The story of the plates is the story of the Shards of Chaos. The war of the 16 giants had ended. Arceus, the original one, stood alone in the silence that followed. The chaos that had once been the entire universe now lay at its feet, broken and scattered. But victory was not the same as order. The void still churned with the remnants of the fallen, their essence, their power, their defiance. These were not beings that could simply be erased. They were forces of nature, raw and untamed, and their death had left scars across the newborn cosmos. Arceus understood that to bring true stability, it would need to transform these fragments into something useful, something that could anchor the reality it wished to build. And so, with a will that transcended thought, the original one began the carving. The essence of each defeated giant was drawn out, shaped, and compressed into a single, luminous tablet. 16 of them in total, each one a shard of the chaos that had once threatened to consume everything. But these plates were not mere trophies. They were the building blocks of existence. Each plate represented a fundamental element of the Pokémon world, a type, a force, a principle that would govern the behavior of matter and energy. The plate of fire held the heat of the first stars flaring into life. The plate of water contained the endless depths of the primordial seas that would one day cover the earth. The plate of grass carried the silent patience of growth, of roots reaching into unformed soil. There was a plate for flying, embodying the air that would allow creatures to soar. A plate for rock, the unyielding bones of continents. A plate for ground, the solid foundation beneath all things. A plate for electric, the spark that would leap between sky and land. A plate for psychic, the hidden power of the mind. A plate for ice, the cold that preserves and destroys. A plate for bug, the humble resilience of the smallest. A plate for poison, the corrosive edge of decay and renewal. A plate for fighting, the will to overcome. A plate for ghost, the mystery of what lies beyond. A plate for dark, the shadows that give depth to light. A plate for steel, the strength of forged bonds. And finally, the plate for dragon, the fiercest and most ancient of all, a reminder of the chaos that had been subdued, but never truly extinguished. Each plate was a key, each plate was a promise, and together they formed the primary tools Arceus would use to stabilize reality. They were placed like a lattice across the fabric of the universe, woven into the very framework of space and time. Wherever a plate was set, that element became real, consistent, predictable. Fire burned because the plate of fire said it must. Water flowed because the plate of water decreed its nature. The chaos could no longer overwhelm order because the plates anchored it in place. But stability is not the same as creation. Arceus had the raw materials, but it needed architects to build the world. It needed beings that could shape the plates into something more than just static symbols. And so, before the first star ever ignited, before the first continent ever rose from the sea, the original one turned its gaze inward. It reached into the fabric of its own being, and from that pure, undiluted substance, it began to weave a different kind of essence, one that could carry intention, memory, and will. These would not be giants. These would be smaller, more numerous, and far more curious. They would be the first voices in the silence, the first witnesses to the dawn, and they would hold the secret to unlocking the power of the plates themselves. This is where our story must turn, to the moment before creation, to the birth of the first language of the universe. The Unown were not the final act, they were the first whisper, and their cipher remains one of the deepest mysteries of all. We spoke in the last chapter about the 16 plates, the shards of chaos carved from the hearts of the defeated giants. The raw elements of reality were gathered there. Fire, water, sky, earth, the building blocks of a world were finally present. But a universe is more than just a collection of ingredients. Ingredients need a recipe. They need a blueprint. They need a language to define what they are meant to become. Without that language, the cosmos is still just chaos. It is just noise in an empty room. Before the first second could tick, before the first meter could stretch, Arceus needed a grammar, a set of rules, a script that could translate pure thought into tangible existence. And so the original one created the Unown. We often think of the Unown as simple Pokémon, strange little glyphs hidden in the ruins of Johto and Sinnoh, collectible curiosities from a forgotten age. But this is a severe misunderstanding of their nature. The Unown are not inhabitants of the world. They are the world's source code. Each Unown is a letter, a pictograph, a phoneme, a fundamental unit of meaning. They are the language of the universe itself. Imagine a reality without language. There is no way to articulate the difference between one thing and another. No way to call light into being and separate it from the darkness. The Unown are what give the universe its syntax. They are the distinction between chaos and order. When Arceus spoke the universe into existence, it did not speak in a human tongue. It spoke in Unown. This is the profound truth behind the creation of the Unown as the language of the universe. They are not a code something else. They are the original text. Every star that burns in the sky is a word they have written. Every law of physics is a paragraph in their endless script. They are the medium through which the abstract becomes real. Now we must ask ourselves what role this language plays. The Unown are not merely passive scribes. They are the active mechanism of creation. This is the role of the Unown in manifesting the physical will of the Creator. The will of Arceus is absolute, but will is a thought. Thought must be spoken before it becomes an action. In the void before time, Arceus thought of a universe, but the thought had to be given voice. The Unown are that voice. When the Creator decided that time should flow, it did not simply snap its fingers. It formed the concept of time using the Unown. It spelled out the word for duration, for sequence, for past and present and future. The Unown arranged themselves into the shape of this thought, and from that perfect sentence, Dialga was born. The language became flesh. The verb became a dragon. When the Creator decided that space should expand, it again turned to the Unown. It wrote the sentence for distance, for volume, for the emptiness between stars. The Unown assembled, and Palkia took shape from the completed stanza. Every dimension, every coordinate, Every boundary of existence was dictated by the arrangement of these glyphs. The universe did not simply happen, it was written. Even Giratina, the shadow cast by creation, was defined by a specific arrangement of the unknown. The concept of antimatter, the idea of what lies the perfect order, had to be captured in writing before it could be given form. The unknown provided the definition for the void, for the distortion, for the realm where the normal rules of reality do not apply. This brings us directly to the hidden connection between the unknown and the summoning of the trio. It is a connection that the ancient people of Hisui and Yoto barely understood. They built shrines and ruins adorned with the unknown, hoping to catch a glimpse of the divine script. But they did not realize that the unknown themselves are the architects of the divine. The hidden connection is this: Dialga, Palkia and Giratina are not independent entities that were created and then released into the world. They are the living result of a specific cosmic sentence. They are the punctuation marks at the end of the universe's first statement. The unknown do not simply summon them or call them forth. The unknown, the summoning. When the three dragons manifest, as they did at the peak of Mount Coronet and at the sacred Sinjo ruins, the unknown are always present. They swarm, they spin, they form a concentric cipher that spins around a central point of light. They do not attack, they do not defend, they are reading aloud. They are reciting the original creation incantation from a time before time. The longer they spin, the clearer the sentence becomes. The space within the glyphs begins to warp. The text becomes tangible, and from the center of that spiraling language, the trio emerges. Arceus, as the author, wields this script, but the author is distinct from the medium. The unknown are the conduit through which the abstract will of the original one is translated into the concrete reality of the cosmos. They are the foundation upon which the towers of time and space are built. They are the silent scribes of eternity. They watch from the walls of ancient ruins, carved into stone, hidden in plain sight, because they are recording. They are encoding the history of everything they helped create. Think about that the next time you see their strange, staring forms. They are not just collectibles or puzzle pieces. They are the very source of reality. Each one a piece of a cosmic sentence that is still being written. Every moment of your existence is a word in their endless narrative. They are the language that allows the universe to speak itself into being. With the unknown assembled and the divine sentence complete, the trio was given form, but form requires a place to stand. The words needed a stage. The unknown wrote the script, but the play needed a theatre, and so the language of the universe pointed to a specific location, a place where the cosmic syntax converges, a temple built into the very heart of the planet, a peak that pierces the veil of reality and connects the realms of time, space, and antimatter. This sacred ground, where the forces of creation are bound together by the will of the original one, is a place we must visit next. We must stand upon the stage where the first words were spoken. We must ascend to the Summit of Coronet. And so the unknown began to hum. They had been the first language, the silent alphabet of a universe that had not yet learned to speak. Their symbols flickered in the void like distant stars waiting to be born, each one a fragment of the Creator's will. But a language, no matter how beautiful, is only a tool. It requires a place to be spoken, a stage upon which the words can take form. That stage was about to be chosen, Mount Coronet. Even the name carries a weight that transcends geography. In the ancient tongue of the Sinnoh region, it is called the spire of the world, the axis upon which the heavens and the earth were once aligned. But to understand why this mountain, this single jagged peak piercing the clouds, was selected as the birthplace of the dragons, we must first understand what the mountain truly is. It is not merely a mountain, it is the geographic and spiritual center of the entire Pokémon universe, the point where the fabric of reality is thin enough to be torn and thick enough to hold the weight of creation. Imagine, if you will, the universe as a great tapestry. Every star, every planet, every dimension is a thread woven into an infinite pattern, but a tapestry needs a loom, a central frame where all threads converge. Mount Coronet is that loom. It sits at the very heart of the landmass that would one day be called Sinnoh. But its significance extends far beyond a single continent. The mountain is a natural nexus, a place where the energies of time, space, and antimatter flow together like rivers meeting at a delta. It was no accident that the creator chose this location. It was the only place that could hold the power of the Primordial Chaos without collapsing. But there is a specific point on that mountain, a place even more sacred than the rest, the Spear Pillar, a name that echoes across millennia, whispered by the ancient clans, and carved into stone tablets that predate recorded history. The Spear Pillar is not just a ruined structure at the Summit of Coronet, it is a bridge, a literal and metaphysical connection between the dimensions that govern existence. Think of it as a doorway, but not a door that opens and closes. It is a doorway that has always been open, hidden behind a veil of stone and snow and time. The pillar itself is formed from the same material as the plates of Arceus, shards of the defeated giants fused into a platform that resonates with the fundamental forces of the universe. Why a bridge? Because the creator, in its infinite wisdom, knew that the three dragons could not simply appear anywhere. They needed a threshold, a point of entry into a reality that was still being shaped. The Spear Pillar is that threshold. It is the place where the Temporal World, the Spatial World, and the Distortion World all intersect. Stand at the Spear Pillar, and you are standing at the crossroads of existence. Time flows a little differently there. Space feels slightly stretched, as if the mountain itself is breathing, and beneath it all, there is a faint hum, the resonance of the Distortion World, pressing against the seams of reality. The ancient people of Sinnoh, the ones who would later split into the Diamond and Pearl clans, understood this instinctively. They built their temples and their rituals around the mountain slopes, carved paths that led ever upward toward that sacred summit. They knew that the peak of Coronet was not just a place of power, it was the only place where the gods could manifest without shattering the world. If the dragons had been born anywhere else, the sheer force of their arrival would have torn the universe apart before it had even begun. The mountain acted as a buffer, a stabilizer, a cradle for the newborn forces of creation. And so, when the Unown finished their silent song, when the last rune was etched into the fabric of the void, the creator turned its gaze toward that central peak. The Spear Pillar glowed with a light that had no color, a light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The mountain trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. It knew its purpose. It had been waiting since the first egg cracked. At that precise moment, at the peak of Mount Coronet, the veil between dimensions parted. The bridge was crossed, and three beings stepped into existence simultaneously, their forms radiating the raw energy of the beginning, time, space, and antimatter. Not as concepts, but as living, breathing dragons, stood upon the Spear Pillar for the first and most important time. But how did they appear? What did they look like in that primordial moment? And why did the creator choose to bring them all at once, rather than one after another? These are questions that lead us directly into the heart of the next chapter, where we will explore the simultaneous birth of the creation trio and the silent shapes they made against the dawn of the universe. The summit of Mount Coronet stands as a bridge between dimensions, the physical anchor for the metaphysical events that define our universe. And it was upon this very peak that Arceus chose to act. There is a persistent rumor passed down through the generations of Sinnoh, a whisper that Arceus created the dragons one by one. First Dialga, the architect of time, then Palkia, the weaver of space, and finally Giratina, the forgotten shadow. But like many simple stories told to explain the infinite, this version of events is incomplete. The truth, recorded in the ancient texts of Hisui and carved into the patterns of the Unown, is far more elegant and far more violent. Arceus did not craft them in sequence. The original one brought them into being at the exact same moment. The Unown swirled around the Spear Pillar, their silent language giving form to the Creator's will. And in a single silent event that defies the very concepts it would create, Dialga, Palkia and Giratina simply. There was no time before they existed, because time was born with them. There was no space for them to inhabit, because space expanded around them as they took their first breath, and there was no reality for them to govern, because reality itself required all three of them to exist simultaneously. The Summit of Mount Coronet did not simply witness the creation of the three dragons. It became the crucible where the laws of physics were forged. The immediate stabilization of the universe's physical properties upon their birth is the proof of this simultaneity. Time could not flow without the fixed framework of space to flow within. Space could not expand without the steady pulse of time to measure its growth, and both of them would have collapsed into infinity without the boundary of antimatter to contain and balance them. They are independent yet inseparable. One cannot truly exist without the other two. The chaos of the primordial universe, the seething emptiness that existed after the War of the Giants, suddenly had structure. Dialga began the flow of moments, the silent tick of causality that separated the past from the future. Palkia pushed against the void, stretching the fabric of existence into the vast, cold reaches that would become the cosmos. Giratina took the opposite. In the moments of creation, there are always equal and opposing forces. Where time flowed, there had to be a place where it did not. Where space expanded, there had to be an outside. Giratina became the balance, the antimatter that kept the expansion of the universe from tearing itself apart. This is why, when we look upon them in the modern era, only a shadow of what they were at that first moment. Their bodies have taken on forms that can interact with our tangible reality. They have become physical beings bound by the very physics they created. But at the moment of their birth, they were something else entirely. They were raw, unrefined, and untethered from the rules that would later define them. Their true shapes were closer to the pure concepts Arceus pulled from the chaos. These first forms are the key to understanding how the three of them truly fit together as a whole, how their bodies, when arranged together, form a larger silhouette. The origin forms are not just alternate shapes, they are the original blueprints of creation itself, and that perhaps is where the true nature of the creation trio is finally revealed. And so, at the summit of Mount Coronet, in that single silent instant when the universe first drew breath, Arceus brought forth not one, not two, but three living embodiments of reality itself. Dialga, Palkia and Giratina emerged simultaneously, their forms not yet shaped by the constraints of the world we know. They appeared in their purest, most ancient state, the origin forms. These were not the dragons you would recognize from any shrine or battle arena. These were the primordial, unadulterated states of the creation trio, and they were terrifying. Let us dwell on that terror for a moment, because it is easy to look at these beings through the lens of modern Pokémon art and forget what they truly are. The origin forms are not designed for comfort or familiarity. They are alien. Their anatomy is a direct expression of the fundamental forces they govern, unsoftened by any sense of form or function that a human mind might find pleasing. Dialga's origin form is a crystalline monstrosity of diamond-hard geometry, its body a lattice of sharp, translucent blades that seem to cut through time itself. Its head is elongated, almost serpentine, but the eyes are not eyes in any biological sense. They are windows into a dimension where past, present and future coexist as one. You cannot look at it and see a creature. You see a law of physics given horrifying physical presence. And Palkia's origin form is no less disturbing. Where Dialga is sharp and rigid, Palkia is fluid and wrong. Its body appears to be made of a shimmering, pearlescent substance that constantly ripples and distorts. Its limbs are long, almost skeletal, and its arms end in claws that seem to bend space around them. The most unsettling feature is the pair of enormous wing-like structures that sprout from its back, but they are not wings in the aerodynamic sense. They are folds in reality itself. each movement stretching the fabric of the universe like a hand pulling at wet silk. When Palkia moves, the space around it warps. Objects appear to bend toward it, distances become meaningless, and the very concept of here becomes negotiable. Then there is Giratina. Its origin form is the most alien of all. Where Dialga and Palkia at least have a recognizable symmetry, Giratina's design seems to reject the very notion of order. Its body is elongated, with 6 spidery legs that end in glowing red claws. Its torso is adorned with a massive, fanged mouth that does not belong to any head, and its true head, if you can call it that, is a dark, skeletal shape with piercing yellow eyes. But the most unnerving detail is the great serpentine neck that arches back, terminating in a second set of jaws. Giratina looks like something that crawled out of a dimension where evolution never found a stable path. It is all sharp angles, writhing tendrils, and glowing red hellfire. This is the form that was banished, and you can understand why. It looks like chaos incarnate, but these forms are not just aesthetic choices. They are the true original bodies of the creation trio. When the universe first opened its eyes, these were the first things it saw. Before there were stars, before there were planets, before there was even the concept of light and dark, these 3 dragons floated in the void. Their origin forms are not alternate versions of them. They are the baseline, the more familiar forms in the modern games, the ones with 4 legs and a more standard dragon silhouette. Those are actually adaptations. They are the forms the trio took on after the universe stabilized, perhaps to interact with the material world more gently, or perhaps because the weight of their true bodies is too much for our reality to bear. There is a terrifying implication here. When you encounter Dialga or Palkia in the present day, you are meeting a version of them that has been softened, domesticated by the passage of eons. But the origin forme is what they were at the moment of creation. It is the unfiltered essence of time, space, and antimatter. And if those forms are the first things the universe ever saw, then the universe was born into a state of absolute awe and dread. It is no wonder that Arceus later saw fit to create the Lake Guardians as a check on these beings. The creation trio in their origin forms are too powerful, too raw to be left unsupervised. They are the forces of reality itself, given shape, and that shape is not kind. As you drift towards sleep, consider this. The origin forms of Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina are not just monsters. They are the first impression the universe had of itself. And when you look at them, you are seeing the same thing that the void saw at the dawn of time. It is a humbling thought and a deeply unsettling one. But there is one more secret hidden in the geometry of these forms. A pattern, a silhouette that emerges when you place all 3 dragons together. It is a shape you might recognize, but we will save that for the next chapter when we examine the silhouette of God. The previous chapter left us standing in the raw presence of the origin forms. We looked upon Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina not as the stylized legendaries we remember from the video games, but as the terrifying alien architects of reality. Their bodies were not designed for the eyes of mortal beings. They were designed for a singular purpose that transcends any individual function of time, space, or antimatter. When you examine these 3 dragons in their origin forms, each one cuts a unique and jagged silhouette against the fabric of nothingness. Dialga, encased in its metallic plating, its body structured like a series of consecutive ticks of a clock waiting to happen. Palkia, with its flowing, almost liquid shoulders, the pearls of space embedded in its arms like anchors, holding the sky in place. Giratina, terrifying in its fluidity, its 6 legs and immense wings thrashing as if resisting the very laws that define it. Individually, they look like contradictions, 3 separate solutions to 3 different problems. But there is a secret hidden in the geometry of their design, a secret that speaks to the absolute nature of their origin. If you take the 3 origin forms and overlay them, rotating them slightly until their outlines lock together, a ghost of an image begins to emerge from the chaos. The head and upper body of Dialga forms the chest and the proud neck. The arms and flowing veil of Palkia become the sweeping mane, the ethereal aura that surrounds the creator, and the lower body of Giratina, its 6 legs settling into alignment, forms the long, graceful legs, the heavy tail, the foundation upon which everything stands. The entire physical silhouette of the trio, when composed together in this specific geometry, perfectly mirrors the physical silhouette of Arceus itself. This is not a coincidence. This is not a simple artistic flourish. This is the core of their design philosophy. They are the shadow cast by God before the light of creation was turned on. They are the blueprint made manifest at the spear pillar. This visual harmony is a deeply symbolic representation of the structure of reality. The creation trio functions as the 3 pillars of the creator. Dialga is the pillar of duration, the foundation upon which the narrative of existence is written. Without a story, there is no creation. Palkia is the pillar of dimension, the walls and ceilings of the cosmic cathedral. It gave the infinite void a shape and a boundary. And Giratina is the pillar of substance, the dark matter that gives weight and opposition to the light. In architecture, a pillar must push back against gravity. Giratina is the resistance. Without antimatter, matter has no definition. Without opposition, the universe would simply be a flood of white light with no contrast. Without any one of these pillars, the silhouette crumbles. The creator cannot stand. This is why the banishment of Giratina carries such a tragic, almost paradoxical weight. Arceus banished a part of its own shadow. It chose to stand on 2 legs to be incomplete. The silhouette of God in the modern era is a missing shape, an outline with a piece torn away. The Distortion World is not just a prison for Giratina. It is the hole in the heart of the perfect image. It is the space where a leg of the throne used to be. Think about the geometry of the spear pillar, the very place they were born. The floor itself is etched with a pattern. Many theorize it is a summoning circle for Arceus, but look closer. The spear pillar is a diagram of this silhouette. The positions where Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina stood were not arbitrary points on a triangle. They were the joints of a larger body. The ancient people of Hisui, the Diamond and Pearl clans, they worshipped a single almighty being, but they saw it through a fractured lens. They could not comprehend the whole. They could only grasp the pillars. This is why the red chain was forged. The Lake Guardians were created to be the mind and soul that balanced the pillars. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf act as the consciousness that keeps the house of creation from collapsing. The red chain bound Dialga and Palkia by targeting their connection to the knowledge, emotion, and will of the universe. But Giratina was excluded from this chain because Giratina represents the part of the creator that does not want to be controlled. It is the raw id of reality, the part that resists order. When you see the 3 origin forms together, resting in the void of their creation, you are seeing the complete story of the Pokémon universe in a single image. The beginning, the expansion, and the void that defines the edges. It is the most honest depiction of divinity the franchise has ever offered. 3 broken pieces that, when held up to the light, form the shape of one perfect being. But this silhouette, perfect and self-contained as it was static. The 3 pillars were in place, but the cathedral was dark. The universe was a blueprint, a frozen geometry. Creation cannot begin without movement. The first movement required a shift from the eternal now into the flowing then. It required the first moment of cause and effect. The pillar of duration was the one designed to strike first. Dialga had to awaken, and when Dialga opened its eyes for the very first time, it did not simply start a clock. It shattered the infinite stillness of Arceus' dream and birthed the arrow of time. The universe took its first breath, and that breath was a single, resonant tick. The silhouette of God is not just a symbol of authority, a parade of form meant to visually echo the creator. It is a statement of function. When the 3 origin forms align, they do not merely look like Arceus. They become the engine of creation, the mechanism by which reality is sustained, and the engine must have a first stroke, a first ignition. That first stroke is the ignition of time itself. Before Dialga, there was no before. The universe was a silent equation, written but never solved. It existed in a state of absolute suspension. There was no decay, no waiting, no anticipation. There was only a static eternal now that could not even be called a now, because the concept of a now requires a then to define itself against. The void was not dark. It was not cold. It simply was without measure. And then, at the summit of Mount Coronet, in the same breath that gave form to Palkia and Giratina, Dialga was given shape. The origin form of Dialga is a creature that defies easy description. It is part machine, part crystal, part living constellation. It radiates a deep blue light that does not illuminate space so much as it illuminates the passage of moments. Its body is a lattice of diamond and steel, but at the center of that primal beast, encased within a glass cage of pure chronal energy, a heart begins to form. This heartbeat is not a muscle contracting, it is the compression of the universe into a single point of awareness and its immediate release. It is the first division of reality into two distinct states, the state before the beat and the state after the beat. With that first contraction, the flow of time was initiated. The universe woke up. It drew its first breath, and that breath was a second. Let us dwell in that first second for a moment. It was not like our seconds. It was thick. It was heavy with the weight of all possibility. In that first second, Dialga's consciousness reached out and defined the three pillars of temporal existence. The past was born as the echo of the beat that had just ended. The present was born as the sharp edge of the beat itself, the only point of true action. And the future was born as the tension of the heart preparing for its next pulse. These three concepts had never existed before. They were invented in that single moment. Dialga did not merely start a clock that had been silent. Dialga built the clock. It carved the numbers into the face of reality. It established that there would be a direction to existence, a flow. This flow is what we call the temporal stream, and Dialga is not just its creator, it is its guardian. The term guardian is important here. It implies danger. It implies that the stream can be threatened. Time is not a rigid track. It is a living current, and currents can be diverted. They can be poisoned. They can be frozen. Palkia's domain is space, and space allows for distance. But when space is folded or torn, it creates friction against the surface of time. A warp in space can loop a moment back on itself. A rupture in the fabric of reality can cause a stain in the timeline. And when the antimatter of Giratina's realm brushes against our world, it creates a pressure that can stop time dead in its tracks. This is why Dialga is the warden. It feels every perturbation in the stream. It is constantly, eternally aware of where every second belongs. If a moment is threatened, Dialga must intervene. It can slow time to a crawl. It can hasten it to a blur. It can trap a being in a perpetual instant if that is what is required to protect the whole. But the greatest burden of the Guardian is not the battles, it is the loneliness. Dialga experiences time in a way no other being can comprehend. For us, the past is a memory, the future is a mystery. For Dialga, the past is a landscape it can walk through. The future is a wave it can sense crashing toward it from miles away. It lives in a constant state of multiplicity. It feels the birth of every star and the silent death of every moment simultaneously. It is a being of profound isolation, standing at the center of an infinite river. The river flows from the future into the past, and the present is the narrows through which all things must pass. Dialga keeps the current moving. It keeps the water from pooling into a stagnant lake of chaos. Without Dialga, time would have no director. It would become a sea of conflicting chronologies. The past would bleed into the future would collapse into the past. Order would dissolve. This is the true weight of the first heartbeat. It was not just a beginning, it was a commitment, a promise that the universe would have a story, that there would be a before and an after. That cause would always precede effect, that life would have a rhythm. And now, as we rest here in the quiet of the present moment, we are riding that rhythm. Your heartbeat right now is echoing the primal heartbeat of the first dragon. You are synchronized. In this moment, with the original pulse of creation. Your past is a trail of spent moments. Your future is a field of potential, and the Guardian watches over it all. But where does a being so tied to the flow of existence rest? Not in a cave, not on a mountain. The Guardian of Time requires a home that exists outside the normal constraints of space, a realm where time is not just a property, a physical substance. We must follow the stream inward, past the surface of the universe, into the depth where the current is strongest. There is a place that exists purely for the Warden, a sanctuary of crystal and stillness. Built from the very fabric of chronological energy, that realm is the Temporal World, and its gates are about to open. With that first heartbeat, Dialga did not simply set the universe in motion. It carved out a home for itself outside of that motion. The Temporal World is not a planet or a cave tucked away in the mountains of Sinnoh. It is a dimension of pure causality. It exists wrapped around every timeline, a silent observer of every second. Dialga resides in the panopticon of existence, a throne room built from the concept of sequence itself. To step into the Temporal World is to step into the mind of time. In the physical realm, we experience time as a river. It flows from a source we call the past, passes us in the present, and empties into an ocean we call the future. We are prisoners of this arrow, unable to look back without memory or forward without speculation. But inside the Temporal World, this river is revealed to be a lake. Past, present, and future are not separate rooms. They are a single vast gallery. Dialga moves through this lake like a fish moves through water, except the water is the fourth dimension. There is no waiting in this place. There is no suspense. There is only the absolute, crystalline certainty of what was, what is, and what will be. This is why Dialga can command time so absolutely with a single roar. It is not casting a spell or bending a law. It is simply reminding the universe that time is a guest in its home, and it can revoke the invitation at any moment. What does it mean to exist in a realm where time does not pass the way you understand it? Where is the comfort of a night's sleep in a dimension that does not have nights? The Temporal World is a realm of absolute order. It is eerily silent. The only sound is the deep, resonant bass of Dialga's own heartbeat, echoing through the dimension. There is no wind, no weather, no chaos. It is the mind of a deity made manifest, stripped entirely of emotion, functioning purely on logic and sequence. It is a sterile, perfect environment designed for one purpose: the observation and maintenance of every moment that has ever happened or will ever happen. Scattered across this dimension are vast crystal formations. They are not mineral deposits formed by volcanic pressure or geological time. They are history frozen into physical form. When a significant event occurs in the physical universe, a resonance is sent back to the Temporal World. That event crystallizes. These structures are the library of existence. They glow with an internal light, the color of the age they represent. Ancient battles between Dialga and Palkia might be frozen in a deep twilight amber crystal. The birth of a single human child might appear as a tiny, shimmering fleck of white. Dialga can peer into these crystals, shatter them to revisit a specific moment, or reinforce them to ensure that moment remains exactly as it must. Listeners who drift off to this chapter might find themselves dreaming of endless hallways lined with clocks, of books made of glass, of the feeling of being watched by something that exists in every moment of your life simultaneously. This is the touch of the Temporal World on the sleeping mind, a brief glimpse into the prison of perfect order where Dialga keeps its eternal vigil. It is a dimension of terrifying beauty, a place where the universe is laid out like a blueprint, and the great dragon of time is the architect who never sleeps. But a universe governed only by time would be a paradox waiting to happen. A ticking clock cannot exist in a void. Every moment needs a place to happen. Every second needs a space to occupy. If Dialga defines thee, something else must define thee, and that takes us from the library of frozen history into the artist's studio of creation itself. The domain of Palkia is not rigid crystals and frozen moments. It is fluid. It is breath. It is the infinite, expanding canvas upon which the moments drawn by Dialga are finally allowed to exist. In our next chapter, we will step out of the strict, silent order of the temporal world and into the boundless, breathing expanse of the cosmos. We will follow the threads of creation into the heart of the spatial dimension. That chapter is called Palkia and the Infinite Reach. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. Dialga's heartbeat had set time in motion, carving the past, present, and future into a river that would never stop flowing. But a river needs a channel, a path to travel through, a container to hold its currents. Without space, time would have nowhere to go. It would exist as a single frozen point, an eternal now with no distance, no separation, no room for a universe to unfold. That is where Palkia enters the story. The moment the flow of time began, the fabric of existence demanded extension. And so, in that same primordial instant, Palkia stretched out the void, creating the infinite reach that we call space. The expansion of the universe and the creation of physical distance are Palkia's most fundamental gifts. Before Palkia, there was only a dimensionless point, a singularity of potential locked inside the chaos. At the moment Palkia manifested at the peak of Mount Coronet, that point exploded outward, not as an explosion of fire or light, but as a silent, relentless unfolding of emptiness. Space itself began to breathe, expanding in all directions at once, carving out a canvas for stars, galaxies and worlds to be painted upon. Every inch of that canvas, every mile between one atom and the next, is a testament to Palkia's power. The distance you feel between your thoughts and the ceiling above you, the vastness that separates the Earth from the Moon, the unimaginable gulfs that stretch between galaxies. All of it is held together and held apart by the spatial dragon. But Palkia does not simply create space and let it lie static. Its dominion goes far deeper than the mere expansion of a vacuum. Palkia's ability to warp the fabric of space to connect distant points is what makes it not just a creator, but a weaver of shortcuts. A being that can fold the universe like a piece of paper to bring faraway places into sudden, impossible proximity. Imagine a thread stretched across the cosmos, and then imagine Palkia reaching out with its pearl-like grasp and pulling that thread until two distant stars touch. That is the nature of spatial distortion. It can tear paths through reality, allowing something that was 1 billion light years away to be reached in a single step. In the ancient myths of Sinnoh, this power was both revered and feared, because when Palkia bends space, the natural order of distance is undone, and the boundaries between here and there become meaningless. And yet, Palkia's influence does not stop at the edges of our own universe. The creation of alternate realities and parallel dimensions through Palkia's power is one of the most profound and mysterious aspects of its existence. When space first expanded, it did not do so into a single perfect shape. Instead, the expansion was turbulent, creating folds and pockets in the fabric of reality. These pockets are what we now call parallel dimensions, alternate timelines, and separate planes of existence. Each time Palkia flexes its power, it can split off a new branch of reality. A universe where the rules might be slightly different, where the stars are arranged in unfamiliar patterns, where the outcome of a single moment was changed. In this sense, Palkia is not just the architect of our space, but the gardener of an infinite multiverse, endlessly generating new landscapes of possibility. This power brings with it a profound responsibility and also a deep loneliness. While Dialga rules over the linear progression of time, Palkia oversees the infinite expanse of space, a realm that is by nature fragmented and isolated. 2 points in space may never touch each other unless Palkia wills it. And in those folds of reality, alternative versions of the same world can exist side by side, yet remain eternally separate. One can only imagine what it feels like to be aware of all those countless parallel dimensions, each one a different dream, a different echo of a single original thought. Palkia must perceive reality as a vast, glittering web of possibilities, each strand separate yet connected at its core. There is a quiet tragedy in that perception, to know that there are worlds where everything turned out differently, where the Diamond and Pearl clans never quarrelled, where Giratina was never banished, where Arceus still walks among mortals. Yet to be unable to reach those worlds without tearing the fabric of existence itself. Palkia's power to connect distant points is matched by its power to keep them apart. For if space were fully unified, the multiverse would collapse into a single, indistinguishable chaos. So Palkia must hold the tension, stretching and folding, but never breaking the delicate balance that keeps each reality intact. This is why the spatial dragon is often depicted with its pearl, a symbol of the cosmic sphere that contains all directions at once. In battle, Palkia can use that pearl to warp space around its opponent, trapping them in a pocket dimension where up is down and near is far. It can create rifts that allow it to step from one side of the planet to the other in an instant. But its true glory lies not in combat, but in the silent, ongoing work of holding the universe open. Every night you look up at the stars, you are seeing the handiwork of Palkia, the distances that allow light to travel, the emptiness that gives shape to matter, the endless expansion that keeps the cosmos alive. Now, consider the dimension where Palkia resides. While we have glimpsed the Temporal World, the realm of time flowing in strange currents, there is another plane that mirrors it, the Spatial World. This is a dimension where the very concepts of distance and position are fluid, where Palkia can retreat to stretch its boundaries without disturbing the physical universe. It is a place of endless, twisting corridors of light and darkness, where the three-dimensional world we know is just one layer of an infinite onion. In the next chapter, we will cross into that realm and explore what it means to live in a space that has no fixed form. But for now, let Palkia's infinite reach settle over you like a blanket, a reminder that even the vast emptiness of the cosmos is held in the gentle grasp of a dragon. And so, with Palkia's first breath, the universe stretched outward, carving distance into the void. Stars were born in loneliness, galaxies spun into being, and the fabric of existence became a vast, layered tapestry. But where does Palkia itself reside? For a being that governs the very concept of space, its home must be something beyond our comprehension. And indeed, it is. The spatial world is not a place you can find on any map. It is a dimension that exists alongside our own, yet completely separate, a realm where the rules of geometry are suggestions, not laws. If you were to step into the spatial world, the first thing you would notice is the architecture, not built of stone or metal, or any material you know. Instead, it is pearl-like, shifting, iridescent, walls that shimmer like the inside of a shell, curving in directions that hurt the eye, corridors that spiral inward and outward at the same time. The very floor beneath your feet might ripple like water, and then harden into a surface that reflects your own image from 1,000 impossible angles. This is Palkia's domain, a space that has no fixed form because space itself is its substance. It is constantly rearranging itself, responding to the will of its master. And yet the spatial world is not a peaceful sanctuary. It is unstable. For a human or any ordinary creature, stepping into it is disorienting, even dangerous. Gravity can flip without warning. A doorway you walk through might lead to a ceiling, and a pit you fall into might drop you onto a wall. The instability is not a flaw. It is the natural state of a dimension where space is not a stage, but a living, breathing entity. Palkia does not merely live here. It is constantly moulding the space around itself, like a sculptor who never sets down the chisel. And for a visitor, that means you are never truly safe. Your mind cannot keep up with the shifting geometry. You would feel the vertigo of standing still while the world rotates around you. Some say that those who spend too long in the spatial world lose their sense of direction forever, their brains rewired by the constant flux. But why is it so unstable? Because the spatial world is not a finished creation. It is the workshop, where Palkia continues its work. Every ripple in the fabric of space in our universe, every new star system, every black hole bending light, every quantum fluctuation is influenced by Palkia's presence here. In the spatial world, distances are not fixed. A step can take you a light year, or 1,000 miles, or only an inch, depending on Palkia's whim. And the only force that anchors this chaos is Palkia itself. It is the still point in the turning world, the axis around which the pearl-like chambers revolve. And this brings us to one of Palkia's most crucial responsibilities: maintaining the boundaries between different worlds. For the universe is not a single continuous space. There are layers, parallel dimensions. The Distortion World, the Temporal World, the world of humans and Pokémon, and many others we may never know. These realms are separated by membranes of space that are thin and fragile. Without Palkia's constant vigilance, these membranes could tear and realities would bleed into one another. Time might spill into the Distortion World. Antimatter might leak into our own. The result would be catastrophic, cosmic chaos beyond description. So Palkia patrols the borders. It seals the rifts. It stitches the fabric of reality with every breath. This is perhaps its most silent, most thankless duty. The spatial world is both its sanctuary and its fortress, a place where it can rest and prepare for the endless work of holding the universe together. And yet, even in this pearl-like haven, there is tension. For Palkia is not alone in its task. Dialga governs time, and the two are eternally entangled. Their domains are not separate. They are two sides of the same coin. Every act of space creation implies a moment in time. Every moment in time contains a point in space. So the spatial world, for all its isolation, is always aware of the temporal world next door. The walls between them are the thinnest of all. And sometimes, when Dialga roars, the vibrations travel through the fabric of space, causing ripples in the pearl chambers. Palkia must constantly adjust, aligning its boundaries to maintain the delicate balance. This is the eternal dance of the creation trio, a ballet of forces that began at the dawn of existence and will continue until the last star flickers out. But what is the nature of these forces themselves? How does Palkia's control of space actually work on a fundamental level? That is a question that reveals the deepest secrets of the trio's power, and it is a story we will explore next. Because to understand the physics of space and time is to understand the very language of creation. And in the next chapter, we will peel back the layers of reality to see how these legendary dragons truly shape our world. We have walked through the shimmering corridors of Palkia's realm, a dimension where distance bends at the dragon's whim, and the very walls seem to breathe with possibility. But for all its wonders, that spatial world exists in a waiting state. It is a stage without a play, a canvas without a brushstroke. It requires the passage of moments to become something more than a static hall of mirrors. This is where the physics of the trio becomes essential, because time and space are not merely neighbours in the cosmos. They are partners in a dance that gives birth to every star, every planet, every heartbeat. When Dialga first stirred, time began to flow, but that flow needed somewhere to go. It needed a vessel, a continuum that could hold the past, present, and future. Palkia provided that vessel by expanding the void into a vast expanse. In that single instant, the two became inseparable. What we call the universe is actually the product of their union. This is the symbiotic relationship between time and space, a partnership so deep that each defines the other. Palkia stretches the fabric of existence, and Dialga causes that fabric to ripple. Without one, the other would be a lifeless concept, an abstraction with no power to sustain anything. And it is precisely because they need each other that a living universe can exist at all. Consider time on its own. If time passed but nothing moved, if there were no positions to change, no distances to cross, then what would time even measure? It would be a meaningless tick, a beat with no rhythm. Conversely, if space existed but nothing ever changed within it, if no moment followed the next, then the universe would be a frozen snapshot. Stars would hang in place, their light never reaching an eye. Life requires time to experience space. It requires change, growth, decay. Without the two intertwined, there is no capacity for a living universe. That is why one cannot exist without the other to sustain a living universe. They are the breath and the lungs, the fire and the air. The physical plane, the world we inhabit with its mountains and oceans and creatures that breathe, hangs on a delicate balance. This balance is not a static equilibrium, but a dynamic tension, constantly maintained by the very existence of Dialga and Palkia. They are opposites in a sense, yet their opposition creates stability. Imagine a tightrope walker using two poles to steady themselves. One pole is time, the other is space. If one pole grows heavier, the walker falls. If one dragon asserts dominance, the entire architecture of reality begins to tremble. This is the delicate balance required to prevent the collapse of the physical plane. When Dialga and Palkia quarrel, the consequence is first-hand. Their disagreements are not minor, they are fundamental. They argue over which of them is the true architect of creation. The Diamond Clan and Pearl Clan took sides in this ancient dispute, each worshipping one dragon as the definitive power, but their conflict mirrors a deeper truth. The imbalance between time and space can tear the world apart. The space-time rifts that tore through Hisui were a direct result of this friction. The very ground wavered, and the fabric of reality frayed at the edges. It took the intervention of the Lake Guardians and the forging of the Red Chain to restore harmony. Those artifacts were not merely tools of control. They were symbols of the necessity of balance. Yet there is a third presence in this dynamic. Giratina, the outcast of the trio, was originally meant to govern antimatter, the counterpart to the matter that fills space and time, but its nature was too volatile. It threatened the delicate balance that Dialga and Palkia had only just established. So Arceus placed it in the Distortion World, a realm where time does not flow and space is a labyrinth. That place is a warning. A universe without balance becomes a prison of chaos. Even in exile, Giratina remains part of the equation, a shadow that reminds us that the harmony of the physical plane is fragile. Think for a moment about the scale of this cooperation. Every movement you make relies on both time and space. Your hand moves through the air over a fraction of a second. That instant is measured by Dialga. That distance is shaped by Palkia. Together they allow you to exist, to think, to breathe. The entire clockwork of the cosmos, from the rotation of galaxies to the flutter of a hummingbird's wings, is possible only because these two forces work in concert. They are the twin pillars that hold up the temple of reality, and yet they are not the whole story. Because before they were born, before the first second and the first expanse, there was something else. It was not nothing. It was a state of pure potential, a chaos that Arceus rose from and then organized. That original substance still lingers at the edges of the universe and in the hearts of the dragons themselves. When we examine the trio together, that they are more than separate entities. They are aspects of a whole that once was disordered. The very fact that they can argue indicates an underlying unity from which they sprang. They carry within them the memory of that primordial state, and sometimes it threatens to surface. Understanding the physics of the trio leads us inevitably to that original condition, because if time and space are so interdependent, what holds them together at the deepest level? What is the glue that prevents their partnership from dissolving into conflict forever? The answer lies in the chaotic foundation from which they were carved. It is the source of their power, and the reason they cannot truly destroy one another. They are bound by a common origin, and that origin is the next piece of the puzzle. This brings us to the threshold of a deeper mystery. We have spent many chapters exploring the creation of the universe through the three dragons, but we have yet to step into the space between the moments, the silent roar of existence before order took hold. That is the subject we must turn to now. In the next chapter, we will descend into the source itself, the raw, untamed state from which all things arose. It is a concept that the ancients spoke of in whispers, a name that carries weight beyond the world of forms. That state is called the Primordial Chaos, and to understand it is to understand why the trio are the way they are, and why the universe remains alive and breathing. So time and space, as we've seen, are inseparable. One cannot exist without the other, but in the earliest moments of the universe, neither had yet taken shape. The void was absolute, no duration, no distance, just a single silent egg floating in nothingness. And from that egg came Arceus, the original one. But what Arceus brought forth next would be unlike anything that had come before. Not a single deity, but three. Born at the same instant, on the same mountain peak, at the very dawn of creation itself. These three were not gentle architects. They were called the Dragons of Creation, and the name was not a title of reverence. It was a warning. For in those first chaotic days, the universe was unstable, raw and dangerous. Dialga, Palkia and Giratina did not simply shape reality. They wrestled it into submission, and their power was so immense that it threatened to tear apart the very fabric they were meant to weave. You see, when Arceus manifested the trio, they appeared at the peak of Mount Coronet in their origin forms. These were not the forms you might recall from modern Sinnoh. They were primordial, unadulterated and terrifying. Dialga pulsed with the raw energy of time itself, bending moments backward and forward before the concept of a linear timeline had even been established. Palkia stretched the void into infinite space, creating distances that had never existed before, warping dimensions in ways that defied logic. And then there was Giratina, born to control antimatter, the shadow counterpart to all that is. Its presence alone destabilized the reality the other two were trying to build. In those early eons, the universe was not a peaceful expansion. It was a battlefield. The trio exerted their powers without restraint, and their actions created violent ripples across the cosmos. Time would flow one way, then reverse, then splinter into thousands of separate streams. Space would fold in on itself, opening rifts that led to nowhere and everywhere at once. And beneath it all, Giratina's antimatter realm whispered against the seams of existence, threatening to annihilate everything that was being created. The world was a storm of creation and destruction, and the trio were the eye of that storm. They were feared because they were untamed. The ancient texts that survive from Hisui speak of them not as gods to be worshipped, but as forces to be respected and kept at a distance. The people who first witnessed their power describe the sky shattering, the ground twisting, and the very concept of now losing all meaning. It was a time when the universe could have collapsed under the weight of its own birth, if not for the subtle checks that Arceus had woven into the system. But before those checks were created, before the late Guardians were born to calm the raging dragons, there was only chaos. And in that chaos, the trio learned something that would shape their eternal nature. They realized that their power could be as destructive as it was creative, that the same force that set time flowing could also stop it forever, that the same reach that expanded space could crush it into nothing, and that the antimatter that held the balance could just as easily unmake the world. This realization did not bring them peace. For Dialga and Palkia, it sparked an endless argument. Which of them was truly the Almighty One? Was it time that gave meaning to space, or space that gave room for time to exist? They clashed endlessly, and their battles only intensified the chaos of the young universe. Meanwhile, Giratina watched from the shadows, its power too volatile for the fragile reality taking shape. Arceus saw this, and made a decision that would forever change the fate of the trio. The dragons were separated. Dialga and Palkia were given their own dimensions to rule, the Temporal World and the Spatial World, where they could exert their power without tearing the physical universe apart. But Giratina was not given a peaceful domain. Its nature was too dangerous. It was banished to the Distortion World, a place where time does not flow, space does not obey, and gravity is merely a suggestion. And so the Outcast was left alone, watching the universe it was meant to help from a dimension where nothing changes, holding a grudge that has lasted since the dawn of creation. But even that exile did not erase the memory of the Primordial Chaos. The trio were still the forces that brought the universe into being. They were the dragons of creation, yes, but they were also the dragons of destruction, and the line between the two was always thin. This tension between creation and destruction, between time and space, between order and exile, would eventually lead to the great philosophical dispute, a question so fundamental that it divided humankind for centuries. Was the original one a being of time or a being of space? The answer, as we will see, was far more complicated than either side could accept. But even as the primordial chaos settled, even as the universe took its first breath of order, a tension was born that would never truly fade. It was not a tension born of malice, not at first. It was a tension of perspective, of philosophy, of two forces that were never meant to agree, because they were never meant to be compared. The dragons of creation had shaped reality in tandem, yet their very natures set them on a collision course that would ripple across every corner of existence. You see, when Dialga first moved, time began, but time without a vessel to hold it is nothing more than an abstract concept, a river with no banks. It was Palkia who gave that river a channel, who stretched the void into a canvas wide enough for moments to unfold. They were equals, yes, but they were also rivals, and in that rivalry lay the seed of a question that neither could answer, because the answer was woven into the very fabric of their being. The question was simple: which of them was more fundamental? For Dialga, the answer was obvious. Without time, nothing could happen. No change, no motion, no life. Space itself would be a frozen, meaningless expanse, a painting never seen because there was no moment in which to view it. Time was the heartbeat of the universe, the pulse that gave everything meaning. Every star that ignites, every world that turns, every creature that draws breath, all of it depends on a sequence of moments, on a past and a future. Dialga saw itself as the first cause, the original condition that made all else possible. But Palkia saw it differently. Space is the stage upon which time performs its play. Without space, where would time even exist? A moment requires a location, a here, a there. Distance gives time its meaning. Without expansion, without separation, there is no journey, no memory, no growth. Space is the body of the cosmos. Time is merely its breath. Palkia believed that space was the more fundamental element, the container without which time would be nothing but a lonely, pointless progression into nowhere. And so the debate began. Not with words, of course. These are not beings that speak in the way we do. Their argument was a clash of energies, a conflict of fundamental laws. When Dialga asserted its primacy, the flow of time would accelerate in one region while slowing in another, creating temporal eddies that spiraled into paradoxes. When Palkia countered, space would fold and tear, alternate dimensions bleeding into each other like overlapping dreams. Their battles were not violent in the way of beasts. They were violent in the way of broken physics. For mortal beings, caught in the wake of their dispute, effects were nothing short of catastrophic. Villages would experience decades in a single night. Mountains would appear where valleys had been, as if the landscape itself had forgotten its shape. People would look up and see the stars rearranged, constellations they had known since childhood, suddenly scattering into unrecognizable patterns. And the worst part was the silence that followed, a silence that felt wrong, as though the very fabric of reality had been bruised and was still trying to heal. The ancient people of Sinnoh, those who later formed the Diamond and Pearl clans, witnessed these distortions and tried to make sense of them. They saw the torn skies and the slowed clocks and knew that something immense was arguing above them. They did not understand that it was a philosophical dispute. They only knew that their world was being reshaped by forces beyond comprehension, and so they began to worship. One group looked at the evidence and saw time as the supreme force. After all, everything aged, everything changed, everything moved forward or backward. They called this force the Almighty Sinnoh, though they would later come to know it as Dialga. The other group saw space as the fundamental truth, The endless expanse, the possibility of distance, the shape of the world itself. They too called their deity the Almighty Sinner, but they meant Palkia. Thus began a great quarrel among humans that mirrored the celestial argument above. The Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan accused each other of worshipping a false god, of misunderstanding the very nature of creation. Their wars were fought with spears and fire, but they were echoes of a much larger conflict, one that took place outside of time and space, in the raw heart of existence. And yet there was a third presence. Giratina watched from its exile in the Distortion World, a realm where neither time nor space had proper meaning. It saw the endless argument of its siblings and felt a bitter recognition. Giratina had once been part of that balance too, but its nature had been too volatile, too chaotic. It had been banished, not for being wrong, but for being too dangerous to include. Now it observed the rivalry with a cold, patient gaze, knowing that the debate would never be resolved, because it was a false dichotomy. Neither time nor space was more fundamental. They were two sides of the same coin, and without both, the universe would collapse into a singularity of pure nothingness. But the debate raged on, and it still rages even now. Every time you feel a moment stretch too long, or a distance feel impossibly vast, you are brushing against the echoes of that ancient argument. The great philosophical dispute is not a story from the past. It is a living tension that underlies every second of your existence. Dialga and Palkia have not stopped debating. They have simply learned to coexist, to maintain a fragile truce that allows the universe to continue. But the truce is not peace. It is a balance of power, a constant negotiation that requires vigilance. And the ones who have guarded that balance most closely are the clans who first witnessed the distortions, their devotion, their rituals, their understanding of the two dragons. All of it was born from the need to survive in a world that could tear apart at any moment. The Diamond Clan's devotion to Dialga was not merely worship. It was a plea for stability, a prayer that the flow of time would remain gentle and predictable. But their devotion would soon face its greatest test. For when a being from beyond the Distortion World began to stir, even the most faithful would be forced to question everything they believed. The great philosophical dispute between Dialga and Palkia was never just a battle of cosmic forces. It was a question that echoed down through the ages, landing in the hearts of the first humans to witness the dragons. And those humans, standing at the foot of Mount Coronet, felt the weight of that question as though the very earth had spoken. They did not have the language of physics or the cold clarity of science. They had only their eyes, their trembling hands, and the conviction that something immense had touched their world. And so, two clans emerged, each holding half of the truth, each certain that the other had fallen into a terrible lie. The Diamond Clan was the first to carve their understanding into stone. Their name came not from the gem itself, but from the sharp, crystalline clarity of time's passage. They saw in Dialga a being whose power was not merely destructive or creative, but foundational. Time, they believed, was the thread upon which all else was strung. Without it, there could be no space, no life, no memory. And so they called Dialga the Almighty Sinner, a title that meant, in their tongue, the one who was before all and after all. They did not see Dialga as a separate god to be placated, but as the very pulse of existence itself. Every tick of a heart, every blink of an eye, every sunrise and sunset was a breath from the great dragon. To the Diamond Clan, worship was not a weekly ritual or a prayer uttered in times of need. It was a constant woven into the fabric of daily life. They believed that time was the ultimate gift, because time granted everything else its meaning. A stone without time is just a stone, but a stone shaped by centuries of wind becomes a mountain. A child without time is just a seed. With time they become a parent, an elder, a memory. They revered the flow of the seconds as a sacred river, and they vowed never to waste a single drop. This reverence shaped their entire culture. They built their settlements along the natural rhythms of the day, rising with the sun, not because it was practical, but because the light of dawn was a blessing from Dialga. They marked the passing of hours not with clocks, but with shadows cast by carefully placed stones. Each moment was a new chance to honor the great dragon's work. Their most sacred rituals were those that acknowledged the irreversible nature of time. When a child took their first steps, the clan would gather and watch silently, because that particular moment would never come again. They planted trees not for shade, but as a living calendar. The rings inside the trunk were a record of years given by Dialga. They even held a festival called the First Breath, where at the exact instant of a new year's birth, they would all inhale together, as if drinking in the fresh eternity that had just been granted to them. They believed that to miss a single second was to dishonor the dragon, and so they trained themselves to be present, to be aware, to feel the weight of each passing heartbeat. But their devotion went deeper than celebration. The Diamond Clan also understood that time could be a prison. They told stories of those who tried to resist its flow, who clung to youth or fame or power long past their season. These cautionary tales were whispered around fires, reminding the young that time is not a currency to be hoarded, but a river to be ridden. If you try to dam it, the flood will destroy everything. So they learned to let go, to accept loss, to welcome change as the hand of their almighty Sinnoh. They even developed a ritual for grief. When a clan member died, they would stand in a circle and slowly walk backward, retracing their steps until they symbolically stood at the moment before the death. Then they would bow, thank Dialga for the time that was given, and turn to face forward again. It was not about undoing the past. It was about honoring it. The most powerful symbol of the Diamond Clan was the Spire of Moments, a tower built on the slopes of Mount Coronet. It was not tall or grand by modern standards, but every stone was laid with intention. At the top, a single crystal caught the first light of dawn and the last light of dusk. The clan believed that this crystal held a tiny fragment of Dialga's essence, a frozen spark of the moment of creation. Once a year, the clan's elder would climb the spire and touch the crystal, chanting a litany of all the years that had passed since the last ceremony. They spoke the names of every clan member who had lived and died, every famine and feast, every war and truce. It was a living calendar, a prayer woven from memory. And yet, for all their devotion, the Diamond Clan could not escape the shadow of doubt. They knew of the Pearl Clan across the valley, the ones who worshipped the other dragon. They had seen the pearl-coloured skies and heard the strange echoes that came from the Pearl Clan's territory. The two clans never fought openly, not at first, but they argued. They argued about which dragon was truly the almighty Sinnoh. The Diamond Clan would point to the aging of their elders, the blooming of flowers, the setting of the sun, and say, "See, time governs all." And the Pearl Clan would gesture to the vastness of the lakes, the distance between stars, the walls of their own homes, and reply, "But without space, there is nowhere for time to happen." This dispute was not a mere philosophical exercise. It shaped every aspect of their lives. The Diamond Clan built their homes in circular patterns because they believed that time was a cycle, not a line. They refused to carve straight roads, preferring paths that curved and wound, reminding themselves that life is not a straight march, but a spiral of seasons. They even developed a calendar based on the movement of celestial bodies, but they always revised it every generation, because they knew that time itself was not fixed. Dialga, they whispered, could slow a moment or hasten a century, and if they were to truly honor the flow, they had to remain flexible, humble, ready to adjust. The cultural rituals they developed to honor the flow of the seconds were countless. There was the morning grace, a brief meditation at dawn, where they would greet the new day as though it were the first day of the universe. There was the evening count, where they would list aloud every significant event of the past 12 hours, as if engraving it into the memory of the world. There was even a practice called the pulse, where clan members would synchronize their breathing with a slow drumbeat, training themselves to feel time as a physical rhythm. They believed that if they could internalize the flow of seconds, They would become more patient, more wise, and more worthy of the dragon's gift. But perhaps the most telling ritual was the silence of the sundial. On the longest day of the year, the entire clan would gather around a large stone sundial. They would not speak for the entire duration of daylight. They would simply watch the shadow creep across the carved lines. Feeling the weight of each passing hour, children would sit still as stones. Elders would close their eyes and listen to the bird song, and everyone would understand that time was not a resource to be managed, but a presence to be experienced. They called this day the eternity of a single breath, because they believed that one day of true awareness could feel as vast as the age of the world. And so, the Diamond Clan built their lives around a single, unshakable truth. Dialga had given them the greatest gift imaginable, and they would spend every second repaying that gift with reverence. They did not seek to control time. They did not try to stop it or reverse it. They simply rode its current, grateful for every ripple. But across the valley, another clan saw the world through a different lens. They watched the same sunrise, but they saw not the passage of time, but the unfolding of space. They did not worship the dragon of the tick and the tock. They worshipped the dragon of the infinite reach. And their story, the vision of the Pearl Clan, would bring the two truths into a collision that would reshape the history of Hisui itself. The Diamond Clan heard the steady heartbeat of the world in the ticking of a cosmic clock. But the Pearl Clan listened to a different silence. They looked at the world and did not see a story unfolding from beginning to an end. They saw an endless expanse, a canvas of infinite night waiting to be filled or left perfectly empty. This was their vision of the Almighty. The history of the Pearl Clan begins not with a moment in time, but with a point in space. Long before the current clan leaders recited their prayers, the elders of the Pearl Clan sat beneath the vast Hisuian sky and watched the stars. They understood that the distance between those points of light was just as holy as the light itself. The Creator could not be bound by the arrow of time alone. What was time but a measurement of change across a distance? The true fundamental principle of the universe was space itself. The Creator was a spatial god, an architect of dimensions, the one who gave reality its shape, its size, its direction. They called this Creator Palkia. Where the Diamond Clan saw a holy timeline, the Pearl Clan saw a sacred geography. To the Pearl Clan, the world was not a machine built to run on schedule. It was a living, breathing body. The mountains were its bones. The rivers were its veins. The wind was its voice, moving through the vast hall of existence. Their interpretation of the Creator was deeply tied to the feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff and staring out at an ocean that never ended. The Almighty was the one who set the horizon in place. This is why the vastness of the land was not something to be feared by the Pearl Clan. It was the primary expression of the Creator. Space was not an absence, it was a presence. It was the breath of the Almighty held between the beats of time. To fill space without respect was a violation. To leave it empty was an offering. The Pearl Clan valued movement and expansion. Their settlements did not cluster tightly around a single canyon. They spread out across the region, breathing across the valleys and the highlands. They moved with the mood of the wind instead of the rhythm of the sun. Their prayers were not for more hours in the day. Their prayers were for the land to continue outward, for the sky to never collapse inward, for the distance between themselves and the stars to remain vast and sacred. At this deep reverence for space bred a deep suspicion of their neighbours. The Pearl Clan watched the Diamond Clan with a growing sense of pity that slowly curdled into resentment. How could a people who worshipped something as narrow as a timeline see the whole picture? The Pearl Clan whispered that the Diamond Clan had trapped themselves. They had built a cage of minutes and hours and called it a temple. To the Pearl Clan, to worship time alone was to worship a shadow. The Diamond Clan had confused the hand of the clock for the clockmaker. They had confused the movement of the universe with the container that held it. This was the heart of the conflict. The Pearl Clan believed with absolute certainty that the Diamond Clan worshipped a false god. The Almighty Sinnoh was not a king who kept a schedule. The Almighty was the very stage upon which existence played out. To claim that the Creator was merely time was to shrink the infinite into something small and mechanical. It was a denial of the sacred emptiness that lay between all things. The Pearl Clan could not stand by and watch the Diamond Clan bow to a god that could not see the horizon. The Diamond Clan had a heartbeat. The Pearl Clan had a breath. And these two clans shared a land, but they could not share a truth. This was not a simple argument over religious text. It was a war over the definition of existence itself. For the Pearl Clan, the Diamond Clan was not just wrong, they were dangerous. They were blinding the world to the truth of the Creator. And for the Diamond Clan, the Pearl Clan was lost in the void, ignoring the sacred duty of time. Both clans believed with absolute certainty that the other worshipped a false god, and this belief, this separation of two halves of the same whole, would drag the land of Hisui into a conflict that history would remember as the centuries of war. The Pearl Clan found their god in the stillness of a mountain lake at dawn, in the infinite canvas of the sky, in the breath of the world itself. Space was their creator, expansion, the room to exist. The Diamond Clan, though they saw the same sky, felt something different. They did not see space. They saw the memory of a moment passing. They saw the thread of history pulling forward. To them, the Almighty Sinnoh was not a place, but a progression. Time was the river, and they were simply trying to listen to its current. For a long while, these two beliefs coexisted in a state of tense, unwilling peace. They traded, they spoke, but the seed of conflict was already deep in the soil. It began with a question, one that burned brighter than any sun over Hisui. Which clan had the truth? Which clan worshipped the true Creator? The elders of both tribes looked at the same world. The Pearl Clan said, "Look how vast it is." The Diamond Clan said, "Look how it changes." And the question became a crack in the earth. And the crack became a canyon. The escalation of the dispute was not a sudden explosion. It was a slow poison. First came the arguments at the borders, a hunting ground claimed by both clans, a sacred cave where one clan found relics dedicated to time, and the other saw patterns of space in the crystals. The arguments grew sharper, louder. They stopped trading completely. The families stopped intermarrying. The two clans became two islands, separated by a sea of rigid dogma. And then came the first blood. It was a skirmish over a fallen noble Pokémon, a great beast that had served both clans equally in a forgotten age. Each side claimed the right to honor its passing. The dispute was brief. The result was irreversible. It is difficult to truly quantify the loss of life and resources that was spent over the definition of the Almighty Sinnoh. Generations were born, lived and died only knowing the war. The children of the Diamond Clan were taught that the Pearl Clan had turned their backs on the true flow of existence. The children of the Pearl Clan were taught that the Diamond Clan was lost in a narrow river of time. Unable to see the grand ocean of space, the land itself suffered. Farmland was trampled. Sacred sites were desecrated in raids meant to dishonor the other clan's deity. Entire villages were abandoned to the wilderness. As the clans pulled further and further apart, the tragedies of this conflict were countless, and they took strange forms. There are stories told in the archives of ancient Sinnoh, passed down through the quietest of whispers, of warriors who faced each other not with malice, but with a deep, sorrowful duty. A Diamond Clan warden, face to face with a Pearl Clan warden, who was once his closest friend. They fought not because they hated each other, but because their worlds had been built so tightly around this one divine question that stepping outside of it felt like falling into a void. They were prisoners of their own theology. Then there was the plague of distortion that followed their greatest battles. A Pearl Clan hunting party was caught in a temporal loop, reliving the same snowstorm for 1,000 years as the fabric of time was torn in the fighting. A Diamond Clan village was folded into a pocket of compressed space, their homes visible from the outside, but forever out of reach. The clans did not just lose warriors, they lost their connection to the land itself. The late guardians, Uxie, Mesprit and Azelf, retreated from the affairs of men. Their lakes grew still and silent as the knowledge, emotion and willpower of the people was drained by the endless conflict. The very spirit of the world was bleeding out. The land grew weary. The Pokémon of Hisui grew restless. The noble Pokémon, those great and blessed creatures who guided the people, seemed to sense the dissonance in the human heart. The distortion spread not just from the gods above, but from the conflict below. Perhaps it was the sleepless nights of the clan leaders, haunted by the faces of the fallen. Perhaps it was the cries of the orphans. Perhaps it was the sheer crushing exhaustion of a war that had no end in sight. A war that could never truly be won, because it was fought over a question that had no single answer. Painfully, the realization began to dawn. It was an encounter at the peak of Mount Coronet that finally broke the stalemate. It is said that during one of the final great battles near the base of the mountain, the earth itself began to tremble, not with an earthquake, but with a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the bones of every warrior present. And then, for a single terrifying moment, both clans saw it. The sky split. Hovering in the rift was not one being but two, the shimmering crystal scales of Dialga, weaving the threads of time around the peak of the mountain, and the liquid, brilliant form of Palkia, curving space itself around the valleys below. They were not at war with each other in that moment. They were simply present, equal, side by side, two pillars of creation supporting the same sky. The clans fell silent, the spears lowered, the chants stopped. They had spent centuries arguing over a name, a title, the almighty Sinnoh, but standing before them was evidence that the truth was not a single point, but a harmony. The Diamond Clan had seen the flow of time. The Pearl Clan had seen the expanse of space. They had both been looking at the same face of the Creator, just from different sides of a vast mirror. The creation of the universe required both. One could not exist without the other. Time needs space to flow through. Space needs time to exist within. They were two halves of a single divine truth. The almighty Sinnoh was not just time, and it was not just space. It was the balance between them. The war ended not with a victory, but with an understanding. It was not a triumph of arms, but a surrender of ignorance. The clans did not merge. They kept their customs, their prayers, their names. But they stopped fighting. They built shrines to both dragons. They taught their children that the world was made of two great pillars, and to pull one down was to collapse the temple on everyone. It was a fragile peace, but it was a peace built on the bedrock of experience. They had seen the gods, and the gods did not fight. They created. Yet, even as this great conflict of human history settled into memory, there was a shadow that loomed over the entire affair. While the Diamond and Pearl clans fought their centuries-long war over time and space, a third being watched from a place where neither time nor space existed. A dragon of pure antimatter, Giratina. It had not been a part of the clan's rituals. It had not been given a shrine. It had not been worshipped. The war over the almighty Sinnoh had been loud, but it had been contained within the boundaries of the created universe. But the creature in the Distortion World, banished for its violent nature, heard the echoes of that war. The prayers of the Diamond and Pearl clans were like distant thunder in its silent prison, and it felt a grudge grow colder than the void. The history of the creation trio is not just a story of the light of time and space. It is also a story of the darkness that was cast aside, and in the deep stillness of the Distortion World, that darkness was waiting for its moment. The Diamond and Pearl clans exhausted themselves arguing over a fundamental truth. Was the Creator a god of time or a god of space? They bled in the snow of Hisui, fighting over a question that had no singular answer, because they were looking at the wrong dragon. Or rather, they were forgetting the third. For while Dialga and Palkia laboured to construct the frame of the universe, Giratina quietly, or perhaps not so quietly, embodied its destruction. The emergence of Giratina's volatile personality happened almost immediately after the birth of the cosmos. There was no gentle awakening for this dragon, no slow understanding of its purpose. The dragon of antimatter opened its eyes in the primordial glow and immediately pushed against the walls of reality. In the primordial darkness, Dialga was the first tick of the clock. Palkia was the room that held the sound. Giratina was the silence that swallowed it. From its very first moments, it raged against the stillness that Arceus had imposed upon the chaos. Dialga wove the fabric of time, and Giratina unspooled it. Palkia expanded the vault of space, and Giratina punched holes clean through it. Its nature was not that of a craftsman, it was a dismantler. It was the force that unequals what has been equalled. It is the darkest half of the cosmic equation, and it refused to be ignored. And so, the chaos and destruction caused by the dragon of antimatter was not merely violence in the way we understand it. There was no rage in the human sense. It was a fundamental corruption of reality itself. When Giratina touched the nascent world, it did not just break it, it erased it. Pockets of the new universe simply failed to exist. Stars that had just begun to burn were swallowed into voids of absolute nothingness. The very physics that Arceus had so carefully laid down were inverted, twisted, and broken in ways that left permanent scars across the geography of the newly forming world. The Turnback Cave, the distortions around Mount Coronet, these are not natural formations. They are the fossilized wounds of Giratina's early temper. This was Giratina's refusal to conform to the order established by Arceus. It was not a tantrum. It was an ideological war fought with claws and antimatter. Arceus said, "Let there be light." Giratina said, "Let there be shadows so deep no light can escape." Arceus said, "Cause and effect." Giratina said, "Chaos and void." The dragon of antimatter rejected the very concept of being a tool of creation. It rejected the assignment. It looked at the perfect machine of the universe that Dialga and Palkia were constructing and decided it would rather be the wrench thrown into the gears, where Dialga and Palkia, despite their pride and their endless arguments, ultimately accepted their place in the hierarchy. Accepting the duty of building the cosmos, Giratina spat on that duty. It was the exception to every rule, the unwilling slave to a purpose it despised. It wanted to unmake what Arceus had made, not out of malice, but because its very substance demanded the negation of matter. Certainly, there is a tragic elegance to its rampage. It was not evil, it was a force of nature. The universe was built on the principles of time and space. Giratina was the principle of the inverse. The universe had order. Giratina was the disorder, the wild card, the shadow so dark it casts shadows of its own. And in the end, the universe was too fragile for this shadow to exist freely. The song of creation could not tolerate the sour note of antimatter. Arceus looked at its three children and saw that one was a weapon aimed at the other two, a dragon whose very existence was a threat to the stability of the entire creation. It could not be allowed to roam free. The other members of the creation trio, for all their squabbling over supremacy, were united in their fear of the third. The decision was made. A prison was built out of necessity. A realm was created to hold the untamable one, a place where time does not flow, and space is a suggestion. A grudge was born, and a dragon was cast out. This brings us to the catalyst that defined the rest of the trio's history. The moment the Trinity was shattered, and a lonely god was locked in a world of its own making. The moment the Distortion World became a prison instead of a domain. We will explore the sentence, the fall, and the cold, lonely realm that awaited it in the next chapter, the Banishment. The previous chapter ended with the volatile nature of the dragon of antimatter. The chaos it caused was not born from malevolence, but from its very essence. Giratina was a force of fundamental opposition, a living embodiment of the shadow that trails every beam of light, and in a universe freshly carved from chaos, such a presence could not be allowed to roam freely. The stability of time and space, still fragile and newly woven, could not withstand a creature that represented their absolute inverse. So a decision was made. It was not made quickly, nor was it made lightly. Arceus, the original one, witnessed the disruption. It saw the fabric of reality ripple and fray with every uncontrolled outburst of Giratina's power. The universe was young, and its rules were still being written. Dialga was mastering the flow of time. Palkia was defining the bounds of space. But Giratina was unraveling these definitions the moment they were made. The call was painful, but it was absolute. Arceus decided that to protect the whole, one part must be removed. Exile was the only course that would save the creation. This was not a gentle dismissal. It was an extraction. Arceus reached into the space that held the three dragons together, and it pulled. It tore a wound into the very structure of the world, a hole in reality where the laws of physics gave way to raw nothingness. The sound of this tearing would echo through the dimensions forever. It was a rift not just in space, but in the narrative of creation itself. Giratina was cast out, not to a place but to a void, a prison built from the absence of everything it was not. The universe healed, but it was never seamless. The scar remained, a permanent gouge in the cosmos, a persistent reminder of the exile that took place at the dawn of time. This scar is what we have come to know as the boundary between our world and the realm of shadows. It is a place that exists precisely because of that violent separation. Giratina fell into this space, watching as the wound healed, sealing it away from the light of Arceus, from the tick of Dialga, from the breadth of Palkia. It was alone. Imagine the silence of that place. No time passing, no space to move, just an endless, shifting reflection of the world it could never touch. Its grudge was not born of a single act of cruelty, but from an eternity of this isolation. Every moment it spent in that inverted prison, its anger crystallized. It was not just banished. It was erased from the working of the universe. Its name became a whisper, a warning. The dragon, banished for the crime of being too much of what it was created to be. And so the story of the creation trio fractured. One dragon ruling time, one governing space, and the third existing in the space between, forever in the shadow of the real world. That place of exile, born from the tear in reality, has a name that echoes the instability of its master. It is called the Distortion World, and it is there that the next chapter of this ancient history begins. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. The moment of banishment was not a gentle exile. It was a tearing, a violent rending of the fabric of reality itself. Arceus, in its tremendous and unknowable judgment, reached into the heart of the universe and pulled apart the seams of existence to cast Giratina out. The dragon of antimatter, the volatile force that had caused so much chaos and destruction, was ripped from the world it was born to shape, and it was thrown into the Distortion World. This is the realm where Giratina was imprisoned, a dimension that lies on the reverse side of the Pokémon world. It is not simply an alternate dimension like the Spatial World of Palkia or the Temporal World of Dialga. Those are domains that run parallel to our reality, still bound by the rules of creation. The Distortion World is something else entirely. It is the shadow, the underbelly, the place where the laws of physics do not apply, because they were never meant to apply. It is a space that exists outside the framework of time and space, a pocket of the Primordial Chaos itself, sealed away by Arceus to contain the chaos that could not be controlled. And the moment Giratina crossed that threshold, everything that made sense in the universe ceased to exist. The Distortion World is a place where gravity is subjective. Imagine stepping into a room where up and down are merely suggestions, where you can walk on walls or ceilings, or even the air itself, depending on your perspective. In the Distortion World, the concept of a fixed horizon does not exist. Platforms of rock and earth float in defiance of any center of mass, some drifting sideways, others upside down, and you can step from one to another as if the direction of your feet is the only truth you need to follow. There is no ground to stand on, Only islands of matter suspended in a void of shifting purple and black. The sky, if it can be called that, is a swirling tapestry of galaxies and nebulae, but they do not spin in any orderly fashion. They churn, they flicker, they pulse with an unsettling rhythm that feels less like light and more like an ache. And then there is time. Time does not flow in the Distortion World. It is a difficult concept to grasp, because our entire experience of existence is built upon the forward march of seconds and minutes. But here there is no before and no after. There is only an eternal now. A single endless moment that contains everything that ever was and everything that never will be. The river of causality has been dammed. You cannot grow older or younger. You cannot feel the passage of events, because events do not pass. They simply are, frozen in a state of permanent non-occurrence. For Giratina, this means that the pain of its banishment never fades and never lessens. It does not age, it does not heal, it does not forget. Every second of its exile is the same second, repeated infinitely, with no hope of release. The physical landscape of the Distortion World reflects this broken nature. Gravity is not only subjective, it is inconsistent. You might take one step upward and find yourself falling sideways, only to land on a platform that is tilted at an angle that defies logic. The architecture of the realm is composed of strange, organic-looking structures. Curving pillars that look like molten stone frozen mid-drip, floating stairs that spiral into nowhere, and pathways that twist back on themselves like a Mobius strip. There are no doors, no windows, no signs of any design that a sentient mind would recognize. It is a prison built from chaos itself, a cage whose walls are made of impossibility. And yet, for all its disorienting strangeness, there is a terrible beauty to this place. The colours are deep and rich, crimson, violet, deep blue and black, but they do not stay still. They shift and bleed into one another, as if the very concept of colour is unstable here. The air is thick and heavy, not with moisture or dust, but with an oppressive pressure that feels like the weight of 1,000 unspoken regrets. There is no sound except for the low, constant hum that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. It is the sound of antimatter vibrating against the fabric of nothingness, a resonance that never changes pitch or volume, a drone that becomes the only companion an exiled Dragoner will ever know. Giratina itself adapted to this realm in a way that is both tragic and breathtaking. In its origin form, the form it wore at the dawn of creation, it had a graceful serpentine body with 6 ghostly wings and a long ribbon-like tail. That form was designed for the open space of the primordial cosmos, the soaring through the void between stars. But in the Distortion World, that form was inefficient. There was no room for flight in the traditional sense. Not when every direction could become a wall, not when the ground was a moving target. So Giratina changed. It took on a new body, a form more suited to the broken geometry of its prison. It became a massive, demonic-looking beast with 6 spiked legs, a towering neck, and a monstrous jaw. This is the form most humans know, the altered form. It walks on the shifting platforms with a heavy, deliberate gait, its claws digging into the strange matter to keep from floating away. It is a form born of necessity, of endurance, of the will to survive in a place that was never meant to hold life. But the Distortion World is more than just a prison. It serves a role in the cosmic balance that is often overlooked. It is the reverse side of the Pokémon world, a mirror image, but a broken mirror. Where the physical universe has order, the Distortion World has entropy. Where we have cause and effect, it has simultaneity. And where we have time, it has only stillness. Some scholars believe that the Distortion World is the repository for all the things that could not be allowed to exist in the main reality. The mistakes of creation, the paradoxes, the echoes of paths not taken. It is the place where antimatter and dark energy pool, waiting to be controlled. And it is because of Giratina that this realm remains stable. Without the dragon of antimatter to contain and channel the chaotic forces of the Distortion World, the entire universe might unravel. So even in its exile, Giratina performs a necessary function. It is the warden of its own prison, the guardian of the void that lies beneath the world of men. Yet that does not ease the dragon's suffering. The loneliness is absolute. In the Distortion World, there is no other life. No wind, no water, no star or planet. Just the endless, shifting geometry and the hum of antimatter. Giratina has no one to speak to, no one to fight, no one to love. It has only its memories and its grudge. And that grudge, nourished by an eternity of isolation, grows stronger with each frozen moment. Because time does not flow, the anger does not fade. It is as fresh as the day the dragon was cast into this realm. The betrayal by Arceus, the abandonment by its siblings Dialga and Palkia, the injustice of being punished for a nature it did not choose, all of it is preserved in the amber of a timeless prison. And so Giratina watches. It watches through the thin places, in reality, the cracks where the Distortion World touches the main world. It can see the Pokémon going about their lives, the sun rising and setting, the passage of time that it can no longer experience. It sees Dialga and Palkia, still free, still governing the universe, and it feels the sting of rejection. It sees the humans of Hisui, the Diamond and Pearl clans, who worship time and space, but never give a thought to the realm of antimatter. And in that watching, a plan begins to form, a plan that will take millennia to conceive and execute. But time is no obstacle for a being that exists outside of it. The Distortion World is not merely a prison, it is a crucible, and within it, the grudge of the Outcast is being forged into something terrible. For Giratina, the quiet hum of antimatter is not a lullaby. It is a drumbeat, counting down to the moment when it will finally have its revenge. And that moment, when it comes, will tear the space-time continuum apart. In the Distortion World, time does not flow. This is a fact of its physics, a rule enforced by the very nature of the realm. Space does not expand or contract in any predictable way. It folds over itself, a labyrinth of impossible angles and silent corridors. It is a world designed to keep something contained. But while time itself was frozen, the one thing that did begin to grow, slowly at first, and then with the weight of an entire cosmos, was the dragon's resentment. Giratina spent ages simply watching, through the thin veil that separates the Distortion World from the reality it was meant to help govern. It observed the light of the physical universe. It watched Dialga weave the threads of causality, threading the past into the present. It watched Palkia stretch the fabric of existence into stars and planets, creating distance where there was none. And it watched the Lake Trio, the beings Arceus created to serve as the checks and balances upon the dragons of creation. The Lake Guardian stood vigil over its siblings, offering knowledge, emotion, and willpower to temper the raw forces of time and space. But there was no guardian assigned to Giratina. Arceus had not simply imprisoned it. Arceus had replaced its function entirely. The grudge was born from this deep and fundamental insult. It was not a flash of anger, but a cold, deliberate hatred that settled into the core of its spirit like a dark star burning in a void. The dragon was an outcast, not just geographically, but in purpose. Everything it was meant to be had been stripped away and given to others. And so, from its silent observation post, Giratina watched the world it was meant to help govern, and it saw every single flaw in the tapestry of creation. It saw the Diamond and Pearl clans squabble over the nature of the almighty Sinnoh, tearing each other apart over a question neither could answer completely. It saw the ancient humans of Hisui discover the secret of the Red Chain, tool designed to control Dialga and Palkia, proving that even the guardians of time and space could be bent by mortal will. It saw Arceus retreat into the depths of its own dimension, rarely interacting with the universe it had birthed. Every crack in the perfect facade of reality was a data point in a calculation that would take ages to complete. The Distortion World became a war room. The physics of the realm, so disorienting to any normal creature, became a tool. Because time does not flow here, Giratina could observe the entire history of the universe from beginning to end without it passing by. It could study the outcomes of every possible decision. It could see the future that Arceus had intended for the world, and it could plan how to break that future apart. The long-term planning for a return to the world of light began in earnest. Giratina understood that a direct assault on Arceus was futile. The original one was simply too powerful, but Arceus had made a crucial mistake. It had created beings with free will. It had created humans, and humans were susceptible to the same flaws that had led to the banishment itself. Pride, resentment, and a hunger for power. If Giratina could not shatter the bars of its cage, it could find someone on the outside with the keys, and so it waited. It waited for a human whose spirit was dark enough to resonate with the antimatter of the Distortion World. It waited for a moment when the fabric of reality was already strained. It watched the nobles of Hisui, the wardens, the clans and the members of the Ginko Guild. It searched for ambition that could be sharpened into a weapon, and every day of that frozen silent eternity, the grudge grew deeper. It was no longer just a beast of chaos. It had become a strategist, a ghost, haunting the edges of the universe, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back at the one who cast it out. But for this plan to work, for Giratina to ever hope to break its chains, it had to contend with the very beings Arceus had appointed as the wardens of the balance, the Lake Guardians. Uxie, Mesprit and Azulf were not simply observers. They were the checks and balances of the universe, the keys to the cage of the creation trio. Their power over knowledge, emotion, and willpower was the exact counterweight to the raw elemental might of time, space, and antimatter. To understand how a prison holds, you must first understand the nature of the jailer. And so, the grudge of the outcast turns its gaze away from its siblings towards the silent watchers in the lakes, whose purpose was written into the very foundation of reality. That story, the true origin of the Lake Guardian's purpose, is the next piece of this puzzle. And so, while Giratina watched from the Distortion World, nursing a grudge that would last for millennia, the universe Arceus had built continued to expand. The dragons of time and space, Dialga and Palkia, governed their domains with a ferocity that bordered on instability. When they clashed, reality itself trembled. Arceus, the original one, understood that raw power without restraint could unravel everything. The cosmos needed a safeguard, something that could intervene without becoming another source of chaos. And so, out of the same primordial silence that had birthed the creation trio, Arceus shaped three new beings. These were not dragons of cosmic force. They were smaller, quieter, yet their purpose was no less profound. They were the Lake Guardians, and they would become the conscience of the universe. Uxie, Mesprit and Azulf did not control time or space. They did not command antimatter. Instead, they governed the very essence of what it means to be conscious: knowledge, emotion, and willpower. Together they formed a divine failsafe, a check built into the very fabric of existence. Uxie, the being of knowledge, was given the gift of understanding. It could see the past, present, and future with perfect clarity, and its presence could erase memories or bestow wisdom. Mesprit, the spirit of emotion, embodied the full spectrum of feeling, joy, sorrow, love, and anger. It could awaken the heart of any creature and teach them what it meant to care. And Azulf, the embodiment of willpower, was the spark of determination that drives all living things forward. Without Azulf, no being would have the strength to act, to resist, or to choose. These three were placed in hidden lakes across the Sinnoh region, deep within caves carved by ancient glaciers and underground rivers. Their homes were sanctuaries of stillness, far from the volatile clashes of the creation trio, and there they waited, patient as stone, for the moment they would be needed. But why were they created? The answer lies in the nature of power itself. Dialga and Palkia, for all their grandeur, were not gentle. Their arguments over which of them represented the true almighty sinner could tear apart the fabric of time and space. When they fought, the world around them would flicker and warp, and entire epochs could be erased or rewritten. Giratina, before its exile, had tried to intervene, but its own violent nature only made things worse. Arceus saw that the creation trio needed a counterbalance, not more force, but subtlety. The Lake Trio served this purpose. Their powers were not about domination, they were about restoration. When Dialga raged, Uxie could remind it of the knowledge that order must prevail. When Palkia distorted space, Mesprit could soothe it with empathy. And when both dragons threatened to tear the universe apart, Azelf's willpower could anchor them, forcing a ceasefire. They were the emotional and intellectual regulators of the cosmos, the soft voices that could calm a storm of gods. This was their true role, to maintain harmony between the creation trio, ensuring that the universe would not collapse under its own immense forces. Without them, Dialga and Palkia would have destroyed each other long ago. Without them, the fragile balance of reality would have shattered. The Lake Guardians were not meant to be worshipped as creators. They were guardians in the truest sense, silent sentinels who intervene not with raw power, but with the very things that make life worth living: understanding, feeling, and resolve. And yet, the ancient peoples of Sinnoh would eventually discover that these three beings held a deeper secret. Their essence, their claws, their plumes, their fangs could be used to forge something terrible and necessary, something that would allow humans to control the creation trio themselves. But that is a story for another moment, one that begins with a chain forged from the hearts of the Lake Guardians. The Lake Guardians were created as a divine failsafe, a living check upon the chaos of the creation dragons. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf were set into the world to calm the rage of Dialga and Palkia, to soothe the very fabric of reality when it threatened to tear. But there is a deeper truth hidden within the mythos of Sinnoh, a dangerous secret that the ancient people discovered in their desperate attempt to survive the wrath of gods. For the Lake Guardians were not only a passive bulwark against destruction, they were also the key to a forbidden technology, the ancient secret of using the Lake Guardians to control the dragons themselves. This secret was born from necessity. The quarrels between Dialga and Palkia were not mere arguments. They were cataclysms that reshaped mountains and unraveled the laws of physics. When these two titans clashed atop Mount Coronet, the world itself groaned under the strain, and mortals could do little but hide and pray that the trembling would stop. But there were those among the ancient Sinnoh people who refused to accept such helplessness. They studied the nature of the dragons. They observed the delicate balance maintained by the Lake Guardians, and in their wisdom or their folly, they devised a plan to forge a chain that could bind the unruly gods. The materials required for this chain were not ordinary metals or stones pulled from the earth. They were drawn from the very essence of the Lake Trio. The chain demanded Uxie's claw, a token of the knowledge that pierces all illusion. It required Mesprit's plume, a feather carrying the weight of every emotion that stirs the heart. And it required Azelf's fang, a fragment of the pure willpower that drives all action. To acquire these components, the ancient people had to approach the Lake Guardians not as worshippers, but as supplicants seeking a sacrifice. It is said that the Guardians gave these parts of themselves willingly, understanding that the survival of the world outweighed their own suffering. But even so, the extraction of such pieces was not without cost. Uxie's all-seeing eye dimmed for a time. Mesprit wept tears that became the lakes of Sinnoh, and Azelf's fiery resolve flickered like a candle in a storm. The forging of the red chain itself was a ritual of immense power and grave consequence. The smiths who undertook this work were not ordinary craftsmen. They were shamans and sages who had spent their lives studying the threads of reality. They worked in a hidden chamber deep within Mount Coronet, where the boundaries between dimensions were thin and the whispers of the creation dragons could be heard through the stone. The forge was fed not with coal, but with fragments of meteorites that had fallen from the sky, stones born from the same cosmic chaos that had preceded Arceus' arrival. The heat was so intense that it warped the air around it, creating mirages of past and future events that flickered and vanished like dying stars. When Uxie's claw was placed upon the anvil, it did not melt. Instead, it released a burst of pure insight. The smiths were overwhelmed by visions of the universe's design, the intricate lattice of cause and effect, the endless web of knowledge that connected all things. They saw the birth of stars and the death of civilizations. They saw the thoughts of every living being that had ever existed. For a moment, they understood everything, and then the vision passed, and the claw had fused into the molten metal of the chain, leaving behind a faint shimmer of understanding. Mesprit's plume was added next. It did not burn either. It dissolved into a mist of colour and sound, filling the chamber with the echoes of every joy, every sorrow, every love and every loss that had ever been felt. The smiths wept and laughed and screamed as the emotions washed through them. They felt the loneliness of a child lost in the woods. They felt the triumph of a hunter returning with food for their tribe. They felt the deep, aching tenderness of a mother watching her child sleep. And when the mist settled, the plume was gone, and the chain glowed with a warm, pulsing light. Finally, a Zelf's fang was added. This was the most dangerous part of the forging. The fang contained the essence of willpower, the unyielding force that drives all action. When it touched the chain, it erupted in a blaze of white fire. The smiths had to hold their ground, to resist the urge to run, to cling to their own will, even as the fang tried to overwhelm them. Those who faltered were consumed by the fire, their bodies turned to ash, their wills broken. But those who endured saw the chain take its final form. The metal twisted and coiled into a deep crimson red, like dried blood or dying embers. The red chain was complete, and so the red chain became a symbol of mortal will, attempting to bind the divine. It was a declaration that humanity would no longer cower in the shadows of gods. It was a gamble that the very forces that could destroy the world could also be harnessed to preserve it. The chain was heavy with the essence of knowledge, emotion, and willpower. It was a bridge between the mortal and the immortal, a leash for dragons, a key to controlling the uncontrollable. When the chain was used for the first time, the results were immediate and terrifying. Dialga and Palkia, locked in their eternal struggle, suddenly found themselves yanked apart by an invisible force. The chain wrapped around their forms, sinking into their bodies, compelling them to stop. The dragons roared in confusion and rage. They had never been challenged by something so small, but the chain held. The power of the Lake Guardians, woven into its links, was enough to subdue the creators of time and space. The ancient people had succeeded. They had bound the gods. But such power comes with a price. The red chain was not a permanent solution. It could only be used for a short time, before the dragons would break free, and every use of the chain drained the Lake Guardians, pulling from their essence, leaving them weakened and fading. The ancient people knew they could not rely on this tool forever. They needed a more permanent answer. They needed to understand why the dragons fought, and how to prevent their battles altogether. The secret of forging the red chain was not lost. It was hidden, passed down through generations of those who understood the delicate balance of Sinnoh. It was whispered in the halls of secret societies and recorded in texts that were kept far from the eyes of the unworthy. The knowledge of how to harvest the components from the Lake Guardians, the ritual of the forge, the words that must be spoken to activate the chain, all of it survived, waiting for a time when it might be needed again. And as the centuries passed, that knowledge found its way into the hands of those who had their own designs on the creation dragons, a guild of merchants and explorers, always traveling, always listening, always gathering secrets. They learned of the red chain, they learned of the Lake Guardians, and they learned of a way to open a door that had been sealed since the dawn of the universe. Their leader, a man with a smile that never reached his eyes, saw the chain not as a tool of last resort but as a weapon, a means to force the gods to answer for their absence. The ancient secret of using the Lake Guardians to control the dragons was never meant to fall into such hands, but it did, and that is where our story must turn next. For the Ginko Guild's secret was not merely the knowledge of the red chain, it was the knowledge of what lay beyond the chain, a plan that would tear the sky open, a plan that would bring Dialga and Palkia to their knees, a plan that would finally, after eons of silence, force the Creator itself to look upon the world it had abandoned. The forging of the Red Chain was the most desperate act of control humanity ever dared to attempt. To rip the fang from Azelf, the plume from Mesprit, the claw from Uxie, and bind their essence into a single tool meant to leash the dragons of time and space. That knowledge was buried deep within the oldest records of Hisui, forbidden to all but the most dedicated scholars. And yet centuries later, one man discovered those records. One man who did not seek to lock that knowledge away, but to use it for a purpose the ancient clans never intended. His name was Volo, a merchant of the Ginko Guild, travelling the rugged lands of Hisui with a cart full of goods and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. On the surface, he was helpful, generous, always eager to trade or share a story. But beneath that friendly exterior lay a mind consumed by a single obsession: the true history of Hisui and the god that created it all. Volo had read the ancient texts, the ones the Diamond and Pearl clans had tried to erase. He knew that the almighty sinner was not Dialga, nor Palkia, but a being far older, far more powerful, Arceus, the original one, and Volo wanted to meet it. But the road to Arceus was blocked by a secret even the clans did not fully grasp, a secret that lay in the shadow between dimensions. Volo had discovered fragments of a forgotten myth, one that spoke of a third dragon, cast out at the dawn of creation for its violent nature. This dragon was not merely banished, it was erased from history. No temples were built in its honor, no clans formed to worship it, yet its presence lingered in the spaces where reality frayed, in the distortions that sometimes tore open the sky above Mount Coronet. Volo pieced together the truth. The banished one was Giratina, the antimatter dragon, the outcast of the creation trio, and Giratina had not forgotten the grudge it held against Arceus. Volo realized that if he could find a way to contact Giratina, to earn its trust, he could use its power to force Arceus to appear. But the dragons of creation do not answer to mortal whims. They require a catalyst, a key that can unlock the barriers between worlds. And that key, Volo understood, lay scattered across Hisui in the form of the 16 plates, the shards of the Primordial Chaos that Arceus had used to shape the universe. Each plate contained a fragment of Arceus's will. Gather them all, and one could theoretically command the original one to descend. This is where the protagonist enters the story. Volo, ever the charming merchant, began to guide a young surveyor from the Galaxy team, the very person who had been chosen by Arceus to receive its blessing. He offered advice, traded rare items, and posed as a friend. But every interaction was calculated. Every conversation nudged the surveyor closer to the plate locations. Volo never took the plates himself. He let the surveyor gather them, believing that the one chosen by Arceus could unlock their power in ways he could not. It was a manipulation so subtle that it almost seemed like fate. But it was the patient work of a man who had been planning for years, and Giratina watched from its Distortion World, waiting for the moment when the plates would be assembled and the rift would tear open the sky. The dragon that had been silenced for millennia was about to find a voice, and that voice would speak through Volo's ambition. The ground beneath Hisui trembled as the space-time rift began to form, a wound in reality that would soon draw the attention of Dialga and Palkia, and set the stage for the final confrontation between the Outcast and the Creator. That rift is the subject of the next chapter, the chapter titled The Space-Time Rift, the moment when Volo's plan finally takes shape and the Distortion World bleeds into the world of light. Volo had gathered every secret. He knew the ancient relationship between the banished dragon and the Creator. He understood the power of the late Guardians and the ritual needed to forge the Red Chain. But knowledge alone was never enough. To force Arceus to emerge from the hidden spaces of the universe, a crisis of unimaginable proportions was required. A scar had to be carved into the very face of reality itself. And so, at the peak of Mount Coronet, the site where the three dragons had been born at the dawn of the cosmos, Volo performed the forbidden act. With the power of the red chain and the whispered will of Giratina guiding his hands, he reached into the fabric of existence and tore it open. The sky did not just crack, it shattered. A massive tear appeared above the mountain, a swirling vortex of fractured light and impossible shadows. It was a wound in the universe itself, a direct channel between the proper world and the broken, inverted physics of the Distortion World. For the first time in eons, the domain of Giratina was no longer a sealed prison. It was an open door, and the chaos began to pour through. The descent of the world into madness began the very moment that light touched the peak. The dimensions began to bleed together. Time streamed across the sky like rivers of glass. Space folded in on itself, creating canyons where mountains should have stood, and hanging lakes where valleys once lay. The strict laws that define every moment of our existence started to dissolve. A river might pour upwards into the clouds. A tree could be a sapling on one side and a withered, ancient stump on the other, existing in two different eras at exactly the same time. The sound of something that happened 100 years ago might echo across an empty valley, as if it were happening right now. Reality was not just breaking, it was losing its memory. For Dialga and Palkia, this was not an observation. It was pure, unending torture. They do not simply live within time and space. They time and space. When the dimensions bleed, it feels like their own bodies are being wrenched apart from the inside. Their perfect origin forms began to destabilize. They did not just become angry. They transformed into their frenzied states, no longer the silent, cosmic architects of the universe, but raging beasts of pure, unbridled agony. Dialga screamed, and the flow of time became a chaotic river of rapids and dead pools. Palkia roared, and the mountains bent, the ground folded, and the horizon shattered into 1,000 reflecting mirrors. They were not attacking the world with malice. They were thrashing against the pain, and the source of that pain was the rift. This suffering radiated outward from the peak, sinking deep into the soil of Hisui and into the hearts of every creature who lived there. The normal boundaries of life began to warp. The gentle Pokémon of the wild swelled with a frantic, desperate energy, their bodies growing to monstrous and unnatural proportions. These were the Alphas, born directly from the rift's chaotic influence, and the most terrible transformation was reserved for the noble Pokémon, the sacred partners of the Diamond and Pearl clans. Their pure connection to their purpose, the bond that had lasted for generations, was poisoned by the screaming of the dimensions. They became frenzied, wild, turning on the very people who revered them, their loyalty shattered by the madness in the air. Hisui was unraveling. The space-time rift was the scar upon the world. Dialga and Palkia were the engines of its collapse, and somewhere in the heart of that storm, a lone human was about to be pulled into the chaos, to face the fury of the Alpha and the Noble. The rift that tore open above Mount Coronet was not merely a scar in the sky, it was an infection, a puncture wound in the body of reality itself. And from that wound, something began to bleed down into the world of Hisui. It seeped into the soil. It tainted the lakes. It crawled into the minds and bodies of everything it touched. What followed was not just a storm, but a slow, creeping corruption of the natural world. The first sign of this corruption was the change in the Pokémon. You have to understand, these were not just wild animals becoming agitated. This was creation itself being distorted. Pokémon began to grow, their bodies swelling with the raw, unrefined energy of the rift. Their eyes glowed red, a crimson hue that seemed to burn with a light that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. These became known as the Alpha Pokémon. They were not born of nature. They were forged in the chaos of broken time and twisted space. An Alpha Pokémon does not simply attack, it dominates. Its roar carries the echo of the Distortion World. Its presence warps the battlefield around it. An Alpha Rapidash would leave trails of ghost fire that burned without heat. An Alpha Snorlax would block entire mountain passes, its sleep plagued by nightmares from another dimension. The energy of the rift did not just make them stronger, It made them alien. It stripped away their familiarity and turned them into living symbols of a broken covenant between humanity and the wild. But the most heartbreaking corruption was reserved for the noble Pokémon. These were the creatures who held a direct bond with the divine. They were blessed by Arceus himself, chosen to watch over the people of Hisui. Each noble was a living bridge between the mortal and the celestial, and one by one that bridge began to burn. The rift energy found them, drawn to their unique connection to the almighty sinner. It did not simply make them angry, it broke their minds. It poisoned their purpose. The noble Pokémon could no longer distinguish friend from foe, peace from war, sacred duty from frantic survival. They became frenzied. Their plaintive, mournful cries echoed across the fields and valleys of Hisui. The loyal plates, the sacred gifts from Arceus that signified their bond, became weapons of their own destruction. The natural order, the very hierarchy of life that Arceus had designed, was shattered. The people who worshipped these creatures, the Wardens, could only watch in horror as their beloved partners tore through their own lands, consumed by a rage that was not their own. For the people of Hisui, this was not an abstract myth playing out in the heavens. This was the end of their world. The Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan had spent generations arguing over the nature of the divine. Now they were united not by wisdom or faith, but by sheer terror. Their villages, once safe havens, became fortresses. The Galaxy Expedition team, who had come to the region to document and survive, found themselves fighting a war of attrition against the very land itself. Food became scarce. Travel became deadly. The elders spoke of the world unraveling. The children grew up knowing only the red sky and the roars of creatures they could no longer recognize. Every night the moon wept, and every morning the earth bore new scars. Leaders like Kamado were forced to make impossible decisions, sacrifices that weighed heavily on their souls, because every other choice led to extinction. The desperate struggle of the Hisuian people was not a battle for victory. It was a battle simply to see the next sunrise. They did not understand why the world was breaking, only that it was. And in the depths of this confusion, a single thread of cunning was pulling the strings. Someone was watching it all unfold. Volo of the Ginko Guild smiled behind his ledgers and polite conversations. For him, this was not catastrophe. This was progress. The chaos in the land, the screaming of the alphas, the corruption of the nobles, the desperate scramble for survival. This was all exactly what he and his patron needed. What was unfolding in the streets of Jubilife and on the slopes of the highlands was nothing less than the prelude to a final reckoning long in the making. This was the opening act of a scheme so grand, so ancient, and so dangerous that it would reshape the heavens themselves. Because the one pulling the strings was not merely a man with a grudge. The one pulling the strings was a dragon who had waited since the dawn of time for its moment of retribution. This was the beginning of the vengeance plot. The space-time rift above Mount Coronet had torn the sky open, and the world was bleeding. Alpha Pokémon, twisted and swollen with raw dimensional energy, roamed the lands, their very presence a distortion of nature. The noble Pokémon, once guardians bound by a sacred bond, had been driven mad by the chaos, their fury a sign that something far darker was at work. The people of Hisui were terrified, and they had every right to be, for while the rift itself was a catastrophe, it was not the cause, it was a symptom, and the one responsible was finally moving into the light. Volo had spent years unraveling the secrets of this ancient region. He had studied the scrolls, the ruins, the legends whispered by the Diamond and Pearl clans. He knew that the almighty Sinnoh was not just a name for Dialga or Palkia, but for the true creator, the one who had birthed the universe itself, Arceus. And in his obsessive search for the truth, Volo had discovered something else. A presence lurking in the shadows of history. A dragon banished for its violence. A being that had been watching from a place where time did not flow. Giratina. They found each other at the Temple of Sinnoh, that ancient structure perched high on Mount Coronet, where the creation trio had first manifested. Volo did not meet Giratina as a trainer meets a legendary Pokémon. He met it as an equal, a conspirator. The dragon spoke to him through visions, through the distortion in the air, through the very fabric of the rift that was now tearing Hisui apart. And Giratina's offer was simple, intoxicating and terrifying. Help me force Arceus out of hiding. Help me remake the world. Volo's ultimate goal was not power in the way most humans crave it. He wanted to see the true face of creation. He wanted to stand before Arceus and demand answers, to tear down the veils of mythology and force the original one to acknowledge his existence. And Giratina, the banished outcast, wanted the same thing: revenge, recognition, a chance to rewrite the story that had cast it into the void. Together, they believed they could control the rift, summon the creator, and reshape reality itself. But the plan was flawed from the beginning. The rift did not tear open because of some ritual. It was a raw, uncontrolled wound in the universe. And when Volo and Giratina poured their will into it, seeking to draw Arceus out, they only succeeded in angering the two dragons that were already there. Dialga and Palkia emerged from their dimensions, not as benevolent guardians, but as enraged forces of nature. Their battle had begun the moment the rift appeared, and the conflicts only intensified as Volo and Giratina tried to manipulate the chaos. In the end, the plan failed. Arceus did not appear. The creator remained hidden, watching from beyond the veil, refusing to be summoned by those who sought to force its hand. And Giratina, sensing that the moment had passed, that their alliance had been broken by its own inability to hold the rift steady, withdrew. It retreated back into the Distortion World, back into the shadows where no time passes and no light reaches. But it did not go quietly. The grudge it carried only grew heavier. Volo was left standing at the Temple of Sinnoh, alone, the rift slowly healing above him. He had tasted the power of creation, had touched the edge of something infinite, and he had failed. But failure is not the end for someone like Volo. It is merely a lesson. And as the world of Hisui began to settle, as the alpha Pokémon slowly returned to their dens, and the nobles were calmed, the deeper truth remained. The balance between the three dragons was not a static thing. It was a living, breathing tension, one that could be tipped again, and soon a new chapter would begin, one that would test the limits of that eternal balance. Volo and Giratina made their stand at the Temple of Sinnoh. The rift he opened was not a simple tear. It was a dam breaking, flooding Hisui with the raw and undiluted chaos of the Distortion World. Volo believed he had solved the ultimate puzzle. He believed he had forced Arceus into a corner, but the original one does not hide. It simply does not respond to ultimatums. The battle that followed was less a fight and more a recalibration. The Lake Guardians, whose power had been stolen to forge the Red Chain, had awakened. Uxie, Mesprit Azelf reminded the world what true willpower, emotion and knowledge look like when they are not corrupted by ambition. The champion that stepped forward was not a god, it was a human. But it was a human carrying the weight of a world that refused to break. Giratina was forced back into its dimension. The Distortion World slammed shut, like a door that had been left ajar for too long. Volo was left kneeling, his plates scattered across the floor of the temple. His dream of remaking the universe in his own image reduced to nothing more than silence. The moment the rift closed, the world exhaled. The storms over Mount Coronet began to subside. The nobles, freed from the corrupting energy of the rift, returned to their senses. The alphas, those giants of instinct and rage, ceased their rampage. They did not disappear. They simply settled back into the wild, becoming rare and powerful reminders of the chaos that had almost consumed everything. The Diamond and Pearl clans finally lowered their weapons. They had spent centuries accusing one another of worshipping a false god, but there, in the stillness of a restored sky, they understood. It was never about Dialga versus Palkia. It was about balance. They were not guardians of a single truth. They were stewards of a single world. After the crisis, the creation trio retreated. Dialga returned to the Temporal Tower, a place outside of time, where it can watch the river of existence flow from beginning to end without ever getting wet. Palkia folded itself back into the fabric of the spatial dimensions, an endless expanse of potential realities. Giratina remained in the Distortion World, where antimatter drifts like dust through corridors of broken physics. They are not gone, they are simply no longer active. Their role changed. They were never meant to be deities, in the way humans understand the term. They were not gods who answer prayers. They are forces, fundamental constants, gravity, light, the flow of seconds, the distance between stars. They do not interfere because their existence is the interference. They are the structure, not the architect. And perhaps that is the most profound mystery of all. What is it like to exist as a concept? Do Dialga and Palkia dream of the universe they create? Does Giratina find any peace in its endless isolation? Some lore suggests that the three are actually one, that their silhouettes, when combined, form the shape of Arceus, a broken reflection of a single mind. The truth of the creation trio is not a simple story of good versus evil. It is a story of need. The universe needed time to move forward. It needed space to grow. It needed a boundary where reality could end and something else could begin. The trio fills those roles perfectly, eternally, without judgment. They are the eternal balance. The story does not end in Hisui. It echoes forward through time. The Lake Trio still sits in their hidden lakes, watching the hearts of humans. The red chain is no more, but its knowledge survives in texts and in the memories of the ancient. And somewhere on a flute made of azure, a melody plays that only Arceus can hear. The balance holds. The dragons sleep. The world turns. But the cycle of creation is never truly complete. It only rests, waiting for the next moment when the cosmos must be remade. What do you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.